A group of adventurers gathers before the entrance of an ancient and dangerous dungeon. Known for luring greedy adventurers with promises of easy wealth, this place hides deadly traps. Among them, some are so lethal that no one should even attempt to explore. Despite this, the group remains determined, with the disciple calmly questioning her master about the next step. In a dark chamber surrounded by threatening creatures, a young man with a cold expression gives the order with a subtle smile to drive out the intruders. His presence demands respect, and the monsters around prepare to obey, making it clear that the invaders are not welcome there. This is the story of an alchemist who was expelled, but instead of disappearing, he rose and became the most powerful dungeon master in the world. The royal capital of Alraj stretches out with its well-aligned houses and busy streets. Among the rooftops, urban life follows its rhythm, and rumors begin to spread. Something is being talked about inside a local tavern. Inside a lively tavern, people enthusiastically celebrate the hero Alan's group for conquering the feared Ouroboros dungeon. Amid praises and toasts, he is called the perfect hero and a living legend. Despite the fame and miraculous feats, a discreet comment arises, reminding that even they are not perfect. In a laboratory full of bottles and books, an alchemist works excitedly while something bubbles in the cauldron. He laughs to himself, confident in the mixture. Suddenly, the potion reacts unexpectedly, releasing steam. Surprised, he watches carefully what he has just created. The young alchemist Rick Elord celebrates excitedly the success of his new potion. His job is to create alchemical items to support adventurers on dangerous missions. Despite his carefree appearance, his role is essential for the success of groups facing dungeon challenges. The hero Alan, known throughout the country for his strength and achievements, enters Rick's laboratory. He is respected as a swordmaster and conqueror of countless dungeons. Rick, excited, shows a new potion he just prepared, but Alan, direct as always, says he needs to talk about something important. Without beating around the bush, Alan coldly announces that Rick is expelled from the group. The news catches the alchemist by surprise at the very moment he offered a freshly finished potion. Confused, Rick can hardly react to the sudden decision. In shock, Rick asks if it was all a joke. Alan answers coldly, making it clear he is not joking. He reveals that the decision to expel him was made by all the group members. Desperate and incredulous, Rick shouts that it's a lie, not understanding how everyone left him aside. Still trying to understand the situation, Rick asks why he was expelled. Alan responds coldly that he found a better alchemist. Then, he introduces Dorma Gregane, who shows confidence and indifference, making clear she has no ties with Rick, and that the replacement is final. Alan coldly informs that, from that day on, Dorma will use Rick's room. Even facing the alchemist's surprise, he insists it is natural to leave the space after being expelled, claiming the room was only lent. Confused and hurt, Rick thinks about the long time living with Alan and Victor, trying to understand why everything changed so suddenly. Alan bursts into criticism, calling Rick a dead weight for the group, an idiot obsessed with research who only got in the way. Without hiding his disdain, he states Rick was never suitable for the team. Facing the harsh words, Rick only answers silently, trying to hold back the pain of rejection. Even after being expelled, Rick offers an improved potion to Dorma, trying to show his worth. Initially surprised, she admits she expected some skill from him for being part of the heroes group. However, she quickly changes her tone, arrogantly claiming she can make the same potion and that he is completely inferior, rejecting his offer with contempt. Rick runs away, frustrated and humiliated, while Alan ignores his exit with disdain, saying he doesn't care about incompetence. He orders Dorma to prepare for the next dungeon, treating Rick's expulsion as insignificant. Dorma pretends to understand, but coldly comments on how pathetic it is for someone who was once part of the group. Alan, indifferent, reinforces that Rick was never worthy to stand beside a hero. In the end, he entrusts his expectations to Dorma, who promises not to disappoint him, showing a confident smile. Alone in the forest, Rick sits down, broken, still trying to accept that he was really expelled. As tears fall, he recalls how many times he saved Alan with his potions. Even hurt, he decides to move on. He will sell his potions and try to earn some money, even if the weight of betrayal still hurts. While walking through the forest, Rick finds an elf fallen among the flowers, injured and unconscious. Surprised by the scene, he instinctively approaches, shocked by the mysterious woman's condition. Rick rushes to help the fallen woman, who, weak, asks for help. Noticing her wings, he realizes she is not human. The young woman introduces herself as Yuri, a dungeon spirit. Shocked by the revelation, Rick understands he is facing something much bigger than he imagined. Rick is surprised to realize that dungeon spirits really exist and have humanoid form. Yuri, weak and coughing, reveals she is dying from lack of energy. She explains that to survive, she must make a contract with a human. Desperate, she extends her hand and begs Rick to form this bond with her. In the middle of the forest, Rick is startled to see a werewolf appearing before him. The creature, which should not be in that area, growls fiercely and attacks. Without time to think, Rick tries to dodge but is thrown far away by a brutal hit. Injured and too weak to fight the werewolf alone, Rick hesitates as the creature approaches. Seeing Yuri on the brink of death, he makes a decision. Even without fully understanding what it means, he reaches out and accepts to make the contract with her, willing to risk everything to save her. The moment Rick accepts the contract, a bright light surrounds them both. Yuri smiles relieved, announcing that the bond is complete. Immediately, something starts to change. The werewolf before them grows and quickly transforms, while Rick watches, surprised by the creature's unexpected reaction after the pact. Right after the contract is sealed, a black energy sphere swallows Rick. He screams in surprise as his body is pulled inside. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself floating in a mysterious space. Without understanding what is happening, he suddenly falls, confused and scared by the unexpected transition. Rick wakes up inside an unknown and grand structure. As he observes, surprised, Yuri appears and joyfully announces that the dungeon is complete. He realizes that, thanks to the contract, a new dungeon was created, and he is now its master. Rick asks if Yuri is okay, and she thanks him happily for the contract, calling him master, or maybe dear, jokingly. However, the moment is interrupted by the return of the werewolf, still alive and furious. Yuri acts quickly and throws something to Rick, warning that the enemy still represents danger. Rick receives a mysterious book and discovers it is a dungeon catalog. Yuri enthusiastically encourages him to create a monster. She explains that, as the new dungeon master, he has full control over the place, able to shape creatures and rules as he wishes. Rick decides to use the catalog and summons 5 monster eggs, spending his dungeon points. One by one, the eggs begin to hatch before him and Yuri. Meanwhile, the werewolf approaches with a threatening roar, but Rick's creatures are about to be born. The eggs break with force, and, to Rick's surprise, goblins emerge among the shards. They immediately attack the werewolf, who tries to react but is surrounded and struck repeatedly. Rick watches amazed while Yuri smiles satisfied with the new ally's efficiency. As the goblins defeat the werewolf, Yuri reveals she spent 9 years searching for a master. Dungeon spirits die if they do not form a contract within 10 years, and she was already at the limit. Emotional, she admits feeling like a failure but sincerely thanks Rick for accepting her. Touched by her sincerity, Rick watches her silently, surprised by her vulnerability. Rick promises to do his best and build a great dungeon, even without knowing exactly what he is capable of. Moved, Yuri relates to him and declares she will stay by his side forever, listening to everything he says. Emotionally, she hugs him tightly. Even the goblins show loyalty, vowing to protect him. Surprised and moved by the unity, Rick smiles with confidence. Yuri explains that, upon becoming a dungeon master, Rick must now defend his dungeon from adventurers and invading monsters. She encourages him to prepare for attacks and promises to guide him. At that moment, Rick realizes the reality of the situation. He is now officially an enemy of humanity and will inevitably face Alan and the former companions who rejected him. Lying down with a sincere look, Yuri declares she is willing to do anything for Rick, as long as it is his order. She begs to remain by his side forever. Rick, caught off guard by her words and the situation, swallows hard, unsure how to react immediately. While Yuri watches, breathing heavily and confused, Rick calmly starts listing the equipment he needs. A copper distiller, a scalpel, and a boiling pot. The goblins quickly help gather the materials, but Yuri, worried about the number of tools and substances, interrupts him frightened, asking what he intends to do with all that. Rick reflects on the situation he got into, remembering that he ended up forming the contract with Yuri by chance. Observing her, he notices that, except for the wings and ears, she looks like an ordinary girl. Even trying to avoid the thought, he admits to himself, Yuri is really cute. Yuri looks at Rick worried and asks what is wrong. He tries to control his own thoughts, insisting to himself that he only helped her because it was the right thing, and that he can't let himself be charmed by her. Embarrassed, he looks away and quickly answers that it's nothing. But deep down, he knows, now that they are linked, they will stay together forever. Yuri explains that the dungeon's energy is measured in dungeon points, DP, which Rick can spend to create monsters, traps, and various items using the catalog. Fascinated, he discovers he can produce both common items and adventure gear. Excited, he even imagines building his own workshop, but Yuri quickly scolds him, saying that is not allowed. Even so, Rick can hardly contain his excitement before so many possibilities. Yuri explains that a dungeon works by absorbing vital energy, mainly from wild monsters and adventurers, converting it into dungeon points. Treasures are used as bait, but attacks are constant, like the werewolf that appeared earlier. She insists that Rick must prioritize defense, creating monsters and traps to repel invaders before spending points on personal desires. Rick acknowledges that, although the environment is ideal for an alchemist, his priority now is to protect everything as the dungeon master. Yuri informs him that, at the moment, Rick only has the monsters he created before, goblins and slimes, all rank G, the weakest possible. Rick asks if monsters are generated completely randomly, and Yuri confirms, explaining it depends on luck. The chance of getting 5 rank G monsters in a row is low, but it happened. Frustrated, Rick realizes that relying only on luck will not be reliable to protect his dungeon. Rick considers using his remaining points to expand the dungeon, but hesitates because it is risky. Yuri suggests that he also fight personally, but he refuses, thinking the idea absurd. He sees himself as an alchemist, not a warrior. Still, he feels pressure imagining waves of enemies coming his way. When he asks if he seems strong, Yuri answers tenderly that even if he is weak, her feelings for him will never change. Rick suddenly has an idea upon remembering something. He confirms with Yuri that monsters created with dungeon points obey the master completely. After hearing her confirmation, he smiles determinedly and asks her to prepare some things for him. Then, the scene shifts to the royal capital of Al Raj, suggesting that his plan is about to expand beyond the dungeon. In the royal capital, Alan Cole, the hero, appears irritated and in a bad mood during a meal with his group. One companion tries to cheer him up, but Alan does not hide his displeasure. Despite the feast and company, something clearly bothers him, and the atmosphere around the table remains tense. Alan begins questioning his own teammates about mistakes made on the last mission. First, he reprimands Matilda for using the wrong magic against an enemy vulnerable to fire. Then, he pressures Fitz for defeating the wrong enemy, and Fitz tries to justify himself. Despite the tank Victor's attempts to ease the mood, Alan remains demanding. The scene reveals that even among heroes, there are conflicts and tensions within the group, especially with Alan imposing his perfectionism. Alan explodes with frustration during a meeting with his team, making it clear he is dissatisfied with Dorma's performance. He criticizes everything, from support timing to strategic decisions. Dorma, cornered, cannot respond and begins apologizing, completely shaken. Alan, disappointed, questions whether the perfection he saw in his group was just an illusion, showing that even his new alliance is not meeting his expectations. Victor intervenes in the argument and scolds Alan for his behavior, asking him to stop the attacks. He tries to soften the situation, reminding that Dorma is new to the group and joined precisely because she admired the heroes. Alan, irritated, only watches silently for a moment. Then, with a dark and impassive look, he orders Dorma to leave, ending the matter coldly and authoritatively. As the team tries to move forward after the discussion, the members admit they have been negligent since Rick left. Victor admits they made serious mistakes, and everyone tries to calm the atmosphere. Dorma is visibly shaken, and Mary, the healer, tries to encourage her not to get discouraged. But the environment remains tense, and Alan, clearly frustrated, pounds the table in anger, unable to hide his irritation. Alan flies into a rage, recalling the events. He justifies that his strategy was not reckless. The challenge was only rank G. As a hero, he believes he should face rank SSS dungeons, not be limited. Taken by frustration and feeling sabotaged, he kicks a piece of furniture, loudly asking why they stopped him. His gaze reveals a mix of anger and desire to prove his worth. Alan, with a disturbing smile on his face, thinks he could have overcome the challenge alone, if only he had that. He tries to justify his failure by saying it was just bad luck, but soon reveals there was something essential he did not activate. Remembering this tool or resource, his focus turns to flasks and alchemical instruments, murmuring with surprise and excitement, "Monster synthesis?" Rick explains that monster synthesis is a form of alchemy. Even though he is not an expert in the area, he had read something about it. Yuri, surprised by his memory, asks if he remembers everything, and Rick confidently replies that it is natural for alchemists. He estimates that, with the right ingredients, the cost to attempt a synthesis is 300 DP. The goal? To evolve a rank G monster directly to rank D, skipping 2 whole classes. Excited, Rick decides to test the idea immediately, hoping it will work. Rick begins the monster synthesis process. First, he mixes the chemical reagents. Then, he extracts the magic stone from the goblin's body. Finally, he adds the body to the cauldron and stirs the mixture. Despite the rough method, he concludes that just adding the magic stone is enough to finish. Yuri watches frightened, while Rick, dirty and exhausted, admits that alchemy is more intense than he expected. Rick and Yuri complete the synthesis ritual. The cauldron begins to bubble intensely, emitting a strong light. Soon after, a huge and intimidating creature emerges from the process, surprising both. The ground shakes with its appearance, and Rick watches astonished at the creation before him. Rick observes the huge, one-eyed creature they just created, a rank A cyclops. Impressed by its size, he hesitates, unsure if the monster will obey his orders. Even apprehensive, Rick tries to command it, hoping for a response. The Cyclops obeys the command and sits down, showing loyalty to the new master. Rick and Yuri feel relieved to see no problems. They recognize their luck in summoning such a powerful monster, a rank A Cyclops, whose normal drop rate is below 2%. It is a formidable creature, and now it is under their control. Yuri notices that the Cyclops is 6 levels above the goblins, something that normally should not happen. She wonders if this could be Destiny's work. However, before they can think further, Yuri senses a presence and turns, alarmed, shouting that there is an intruder. Yuri and the protagonist observe through a crystal ball that an adventurer is approaching the floor where they are. He is alone, and judging by his weapons and armor, he seems to be only rank B or C. Yuri says that even with a group of 10, he would have no chance against the Cyclops. The protagonist prepares to order the Cyclops, but hesitates. He begins to question his intentions, wondering if, deep down, he wants to hurt or even kill someone. The confusion consumes him for a moment, but he hides it and tells Yuri it is nothing. Still in doubt, the protagonist finally orders the Cyclops to attack. The monster charges powerfully against the adventurer who invaded the dungeon. Shocked and stunned, the man does not understand why a rank A creature is in a rank G dungeon. Before he can react, the Cyclops hits him with a brutal blow, ending the confrontation instantly. The Cyclops delivers a brutal hit to the adventurer, making him spit blood and slam violently against the wall. The impact raises dust, and the intruder's body falls to the floor, motionless. The monster remains standing, imposing and unshaken, as if waiting for the next command. The boy celebrates with Yuri upon seeing that they earn many dungeon points, but something bothers him inside. Despite the joy, he feels a slight discomfort. When she asks if something is wrong, he hides it, saying it is nothing. Deep down, he realizes he felt no remorse for taking a life, and that scares him. Several monster eggs hatch, revealing low-rank creatures like goblins, kobolds, slimes, and a hobgoblin. The protagonist, frustrated by bad luck, realizes only weak monsters came. Yuri tries to cheer him up, saying he can use synthesis to strengthen them. The protagonist says he does not expect to have the same luck as before in creating another Cyclops. The next moment, something bursts out with force, making him and Yuri fall to the ground. A new monster appears, letting out a threatening roar. The creature's roar catches the protagonist's attention, who recognizes the monster as a behemoth. Surprised, he confirms there is no doubt. Yuri then reveals that this is the result of his special ability. He is shocked to realize he has such a rare and dangerous power. Yuri explains that the synthesis ability normally creates monsters with at most 3 ranks above the materials used. However, the protagonist managed to create a rank A behemoth from rank G monsters, which is unusual. Surprised, he begins to realize he can surpass normal creation limits. The protagonist is amazed to discover he has a special ability and begins to think that being a dungeon master might be his true destiny. Yuri encourages him, saying everyone has an area where they shine. Motivated, he decides to work on another synthesis immediately. The protagonist looks at the huge behemoth and becomes thoughtful, recalling difficulties he faced with this creature in the past. When Yuri asks what happened, he brushes it off, saying it is nothing. However, the monster's expression and the roar it lets out reveal the memory is still strong. The behemoth charges furiously at the group, forcing the warriors to hold it back with all their strength. Meanwhile, Rick works desperately on a potion, pressured by his companions. Despite the chaos, he says he is almost finished while preparing the contents urgently. With the potion finally ready, Rick throws it to Alan at a critical moment. Alan catches it and mentally prepares himself as the behemoth approaches in fury. Without hesitation, he drinks the contents before the creature, ready for the impact to come. Alan's group faces a raging behemoth. As the beast advances, Rick finishes preparing a potion and throws it to Alan, who catches it and prepares to counterattack. With determined eyes, he drinks the contents and launches a powerful strike, cutting the monster forcefully. After the battle, the behemoth's body falls to the ground with a crash. The team, relieved, celebrates the victory. Everyone praises Alan for his strength and skill, showing admiration. Even amid the celebration, the protagonist watches the scene with a distant look, full of doubts. Rick arrives out of breath, late for the meeting with the group. Upon entering, he quickly apologizes but is told the decision about the next dungeon has already been made. In response, he firmly places a tray full of vials on the table, surprising everyone. Rick explains that he fully dedicated himself to experiments after the previous mission, using materials obtained from the behemoth to create potions with customized effects. He shows the mixtures to the group and hands Victor a stamina potion designed to recover faster and boost defense. Although thinking it is an exaggeration, Victor acknowledges its usefulness and calls Rick a potion fanatic. Rick tries to show a potion to Alan, but is abruptly interrupted. Alan rejects the vial with disdain, saying it is useless. Then he glares at Rick angrily and harshly reprimands him, asking if he does not understand his role in the group. Rick is criticized by Alan, who calls him useless and says he is only in the group because of the golden potions. Even with Victor trying to ease the situation, the group insists they have a mage and a healer and do not need to depend on normal potions. Rick forces a smile while agreeing. But deep down he remembers when his skills were essential. Now he realizes his value in the team is shrinking more and more. Rick wonders if it makes sense to keep participating in missions. But Yuri reassures him that there are many ways to help. Even without being on the front line, he could, for example, strengthen the item stock. Inspired, Rick realizes that an alchemist's strength lies in the ability to understand the needs of the moment and create solutions at the right time. He analyzes tools like the teleport platform and the communication paper. Seeing that his usefulness goes beyond combat, his contribution to dungeon management and strategy is also valuable. With no sign of adventurers at the moment, Yuri asks if the master is tired. He admits he is sleepy, and Yuri replies that spirits like her do not need to sleep. Thinking about resting, Rick wonders if he can create a pillow with dungeon points. Despite the improvised situation, he says he can sleep even on the floor, as long as he has a pillow. Yuri, curious, only watches as he saves DP by choosing not to make a bed. Seeing that the master wants to sleep, Yuri unexpectedly offers to let him use her lap as a pillow. Rick is shocked and embarrassed by the proposal, saying he feels bad accepting. But Yuri insists, saying he can use any part of her body without hesitation. She calls him with a smile, while he, speechless, is completely confused and flushed by the situation. Rick, lying on Yuri's lap, is visibly nervous but gradually begins to relax. She asks how he is, and he, embarrassed, hesitantly replies that he is fine. Trying to avoid embarrassment, he suggests they make a real bed next time. While Yuri encourages him to sleep peacefully, Rick remains lying down but troubled. Even trying to relax, he cannot ignore the weight of what happened. Remembering the adventurer who died, Rick admits to himself that he felt no guilt seeing him killed. When Yuri notices he is awake, she tries to talk about the previous day, but Rick is still trapped in his own dark thoughts. Rick reflects on the fact that he felt nothing, even though he was not the one who directly killed the adventurer. He thinks that as a human, he should at least have some reaction. But Yuri explains that this may be linked to the contract he made with her. By sealing this pact, Rick not only connected to her, but also to the dungeon itself. For a dungeon spirit, the death of intruders is just a natural part of the cycle of that place. Rick begins to question whether he is still human since he no longer feels anything when killing. Yuri suggests that this change might be a consequence of the contract made with her. Even so, she embraces him and says that, regardless of anything, he remains her master, the only one capable of ruling that dungeon. Rick, still shaken, begins to accept this new role. Now more certain of his place as dungeon master, Rick accepts his new identity. Meanwhile, a lonely girl appears at the door of a house at night, holding a hat tightly and asking for help, calling for Rick with a desperate expression. A new group of adventurers appears before the rank G dungeon. Led by Randall Moretz, an intermediate-level group averaging rank B, they watch the entrance attentively, intrigued by the mysteries that this seemingly weak dungeon might hide. As they observe the dungeon entrance, the group members discuss their suspicions. Despite being only a rank G dungeon, no one has managed to solve it since it was discovered a month ago. The internal structure and monster patterns remain unknown, and not even the most experienced explorers have returned. Randall comments that it all seems like a classic trap for unwary veterans. Randall speaks confidently, saying that previous adventurers probably failed due to carelessness and overconfidence. He believes his group would know when to retreat even in critical situations. The team agrees, certain they are superior. Full of pride, they decide to prove their worth by surpassing those who let temporary success go to their heads. The adventurer group is surprised by a brutal attack. One member is pierced, and all go into shock as high-level monsters appear in a G-rank dungeon, something they considered impossible. One, in despair, recalls a promise to his mother to become a respected adventurer, but now faces death, filled with terror and regret. While one adventurer hopes for a future alongside a pregnant woman, he is brutally crushed by a monster. Chaos ensues. Another is grabbed and killed shortly after. The scene turns into a massacre. The group panics, screaming and fleeing desperately as they realize they face creatures far above the dungeon's level. One adventurer thinks of the future, dreaming of retiring and living in peace, but this thought is interrupted when the behemoth stares at her. Then, she is brutally devoured. The scene shocks one of her companions, who freezes before the creature. Rick, watching from a distance, recognizes the monster with a dark tone. It was the same behemoth he had created. Rick realizes something is wrong with how they have been handling the invaders. Seeing an adventurer fleeing, he decides to let her escape, saying that chasing and killing all intruders is harming the dungeon's reputation. The dungeon needs visitors to generate points, but with everyone being annihilated, adventurers are starting to avoid the place. He concludes that if this continues, no one will come anymore. hurting his goals. Rick explains his plan. By letting survivors escape, they will spread rumors about the dungeon, attracting more adventurers, especially rank B. Since they already know they can handle these opponents easily, he wants to use this to increase the amount of accumulated DP points. He admits he doesn't want to be limited and wants to fully explore the dungeon's potential. The dungeon advances to rank F and the assistant congratulates Rick, excited about the progress. She says being a dungeon master is the perfect job for him. The reason for the promotion was how he drove away adventurers, which apparently favored the place's growth. Rick discovers that the rank increase to F was due to accumulating 10,000 DP. With the new classification, the creation catalog updates, allowing the creation of even more items, including alchemy tools. Excited, he gets enthusiastic about the new possibilities available. Rick understands that letting adventurers escape ends up revealing part of the dungeon's strength, which attracts stronger opponents. For this reason, he decides it's time to further strengthen his defenses. With available resources, he prepares to start a new monster synthesis, determined not to be negligent. On one of the lower floors of the SS rank dungeon, a brutal massacre is revealed. The adventurer group is shocked at the bodies and creature brutality there. Alan, the leader, looks visibly shaken and silent, sweating nervously. Even with others trying to calm him, he feels the weight of responsibility over what they saw. While some in the group begin questioning the mission's safety, one mentions he's not as strong as Alan and considers quitting the exploration. Alan, on his side, is restless. His ability increases his attributes according to danger, but it was not activated, which should mean the place was not so threatening. However, he feels something is wrong and cannot understand why his ability failed again. The group's mood starts to get tense. The group feels growing pressure from the danger in the SS rank dungeon. Tension rises as they remember the last time heroes had to retreat mid-mission. Some wonder if the dungeon is really that dangerous, while others already show regret or concern. In this uncertain climate, an unexpected suggestion arises. Victor proposes bringing Rick back to the group, indicating he might be the missing piece to ensure the mission's success. The group discusses Alan's changed behavior, who has been acting strange since the member swap. Mary suggests the problem may be related to this, but Victor considers that, although Dorma moves slowly, her potions are better than Rick's. He concludes that the difference between alchemists doesn't seem to be the cause of Alan's instability, questioning the true source of the group's unrest. The group acknowledges that, since Rick left, everyone has become tenser, especially Alan. Mary admits that although Dorma is skilled, talent alone doesn't solve everything. Rick's absence created a heavy atmosphere. Some feel suffocated or constantly alert. Gradually, everyone realizes Rick brought balance and comfort, something the new formation cannot replicate. The group begins to remember Rick fondly. Despite being clumsy and a true potion obsessed, he was always hardworking, smiling, and determined, even in the toughest situations. His presence was a quiet source of support that often saved the group without them noticing. Gradually, everyone admits that his departure was a mistake, even if Alan expelled him for unstated reasons. As the group reflects on the past, a doubt arises. Would Alan be able to apologize to Rick? Despite the desire to resolve things, they realize the problem may be deeper, related to Alan's mental state. Forcing him to acknowledge this might only worsen his condition. The conversation ends with everyone thoughtful, aware of the group's growing tension. During the talk, they admit no one fully understands how Alan's ability activates. Even without clear answers, they decide it's not time to force anything. Since the moment is delicate, they prefer to keep observing the situation carefully, waiting for a better opportunity to act. The alchemist calmly observes as she analyzes documents and conducts tests in the laboratory. She wonders if the problem discussed really boils down to that, or if something deeper is involved. Convinced that something essential is missing, she drops a substance into a flask, starting another experiment in search of that crucial piece. Rick watches the 3 A-rank monsters he created: an imposing cyclops, a gelatinous creature called King Slime, and the enigmatic arachne. Despite their high level, he realizes the group lacks a decisive strike. This makes him reflect on the need to further improve his combat strength to protect the dungeon effectively. Rick watches the 3 A-rank monsters he created: the imposing cyclops, the gelatinous King Slime, and the enigmatic arachne. Even with this power, he feels something decisive is missing for the dungeon's defense. Determined, he resolves to enhance his arsenal and improve combat tactics, aware that his personal strength must complement his creations to maintain control of the place. Rick starts thinking about the possibility of synthesizing only rank A monsters, curious about the result. Until then, he had only combined lower-rank creatures. Excited by the idea and encouraged by his ally, he decides to try as soon as the creation limit is restored. However, before they can act, a new intruder appears unexpectedly, interrupting the plans. Rick is surprised to recognize the intruder. It's Mary, a former teammate. He is shocked to see her there, which completely changes the atmosphere. The situation, previously focused on monster creation, now takes an unexpected turn with this sudden reunion. Cheyenne recognizes Mary from afar and quickly descends the stairs to confirm. As she approaches, Mary also recognizes her and runs to her, visibly relieved. Cheyenne, concerned, asks where the other group members are. Cheyenne informs her that all of Mary's companions, Randall, Letak, Evan, and Barrick, are dead. Mary is shocked to hear this and repeats, unbelieving, that they are dead. She recalls that the group went to investigate a newly discovered dungeon near Alruj but ended up facing a tragic fate. It had been a month since the location was discovered, and no one knew exactly what was inside. Mary tries to explain that it was not mere luck that she survived. While others doubt, she reveals the dungeon monsters acted strangely, as if controlled and anticipating the group's moves. Despite the team's strength, all fell. Mary believes she survived because someone deliberately let her escape, as if her life was spared for a specific reason. Mary recalls that everything started a month ago when the dungeon was discovered. She notes that the monsters seem to move in coordination, as if guided by someone's will. With a serious look, she stresses that it was no ordinary labyrinth. Finally, she apologizes to Cheyenne, acknowledging the pain of loss, but asking her to accept this harsh reality. While the group watches Mary's image in a magical artifact, one member asks why she is there. One present recognizes her as the healer from their old group. Intrigued, he questions her presence and expresses surprise, suggesting her appearance there is no coincidence. Alone in the dungeon, Mary walks panting and calls for Rick, believing he is there. She shouts, asking him to show himself if he can see her. Amid the silence, something falls near her, increasing her tension. Determined, she demands the presence reveal itself. Mary encounters an imposing figure, a huge monster, that appears before her. Meanwhile, Rick watches from afar and says he wants to talk to her. The companion beside him finds his decision strange. The monster, however, reacts aggressively and grabs Mary forcefully, interrupting any chance of peaceful dialogue. The monster steps back, leaving Mary fallen on the ground, visibly shaken. Confused and trying to understand the situation, she looks around, asking where she is and trying to make sense of what just happened. A mysterious figure watches closely with an enigmatic gaze. Rick finally appears before Mary, accompanied by a winged figure. He greets her calmly, saying it had been a long time since the last meeting. Mary recognizes him immediately, surprised but also with an expression of certainty. Realizing the truth, she says it was all his doing from the start. Rick responds surprised, asking if she already knew. Mary explains that she studied dungeon structures at the academy and quickly deduced that the girl with Rick was a dungeon spirit. She connects the facts. The dungeon appeared right after Rick left the group, and only he would have the idea to let a survivor live. Rick tries to justify that he thought she had escaped alone, but Mary interrupts him angrily, telling him not to be stupid. Mary confronts Rick, asking if he even understands what he's doing. Amid the tension, she remembers the past, the moment she was introduced as the new healer to the group. Nervously, she presented herself politely and promised to do her best, while Rick and the others welcomed her kindly. This memory deepens the pain she feels seeing who Rick has become. Mary recalls the start in the group, when she was well received by the companions. They commented on how her presence as a healer would be a great help, since before they covered for each other with difficulty. Rick greets her with a gentle smile, introducing himself as Rick Elrod. Mary, shy, returns the handshake, trying to look confident before the new team. The group advances inside a rank B dungeon and believes the next floor is the boss room. Everyone is tense, and Rick suggests a pause before the monsters notice their presence. Meanwhile, he reprimands Alan for acting recklessly and then orders Mary to prepare a golden potion. Surprised, she quickly responds and obeys, showing dedication even under pressure. The group recognizes Mary's value during the mission. One member comments that thanks to her it's easier to maintain the pace. Meanwhile, Rick seems calmer now that he doesn't have to worry about healing. Alan, on the other hand, complains about the research idiot who waits for instructions and comments that even with all this, they depend on Rick's potions to handle attributes and buffs. Mary hears the comments and, despite a serious expression, accepts that it's better to be useful than ignored. Mary timidly approaches Rick and asks if she can talk to him. She calls him formally, but he smiles and asks her to call him just Rick. Concerned, Mary asks if he's okay, noting that Alan and Victor tend to be hard on him. Rick downplays the situation, saying it's normal and he's fine, trying to reassure her with a calm smile. Mary confides in Rick, saying she fears she is hindering the group as a healer and doesn't know what to do. Rick, with a calm smile, reassures her that it doesn't matter and asks her not to worry so much. He stresses that if she worries too much about him, she might not perform well and put herself at risk. Touched by his words, Mary smiles and thanks him. She recognizes Rick's kindness, moved by his care. Rick reveals that his true interest is continuing his research in a comfortable environment. He admits that the more Mary works, the less he has to exert himself, which gives him more time to study. Although it seems a selfish confession, he concludes by saying that, in the end, he likes how things are now. Meanwhile, Mary hands over the finished golden potion, fulfilling yet another task for the group. Reflecting on the past, Mary remembers that although she wanted to help Rick, it was he who helped her in the end. She recognizes this as a true act of kindness. With downcast eyes and moved, she tells herself that this is the Rick she knew, kind and helpful. Before she can continue, someone calls her, interrupting her thoughts. Rick states he hasn't changed and continues his research, even if creating powerful monsters is just a side effect of it. Mary, upset, says she doesn't understand how he could turn against humanity. Amid their discussion, suspicion arises that the dungeon spirit may be influencing Rick, taking advantage of his feelings and controlling his actions, especially his anger towards Alan. The spirit, however, denies everything with an ironic smile, claiming it is doing no harm. Rick reveals that he bears no grudge against Alan for expelling him from the group. He understands that Alan needed space to grow and that, in a way, it helped him find a place where he could truly show his worth. Still, Rick declares he is willing to fight with everything he has if he needs to confront different ideals, even if that means facing Alan himself. Mary, with tears in her eyes, confesses that she still wants Rick back, but he firmly responds that everything he is doing is for himself, not for Mary, Alan, or anyone else. He says that is his true desire. Despite the affection, Rick says he is not kind enough to give up his position for her and apologizes with a melancholy smile. Rick rests calmly while the dungeon spirit comments that making a girl cry is rude. He replies with a cynical smile, saying it's too late to worry about that, especially after having killed so many adventurers. His words reveal that he has fully accepted the dark path he chose to follow. Rick declares firmly that he is now the dungeon master and will do everything to protect that place, surrounded by monsters that serve him. Mary, with teary eyes, watches silently, feeling the weight of the distance between the Rick she knew and the man he has become. Yuri watches the interaction between Rick and Mary with visible jealousy, though she tries to hide it. Rick, confused by her behavior, asks if he did something wrong. Yuri denies it, trying not to show discomfort, but clearly frustrated. Rick, not understanding why, just comments that Mary was only a former teammate and that he doesn't even know what kind of relationship Yuri is imagining. Yuri comments that Mary must have been a close friend of Rick, since she came to the dungeon looking for him. Rick, however, says Mary was always kind to everyone, so he's not sure if that was something special. Then, he changes the subject and confirms that his ability will be activated at the end of the day, but that he needs help preparing the creation of rank A monsters, since the process is much more complicated. Rick reflects that, although he made a contract with the dungeon spirit some time ago, he still knows almost nothing about her. She, in turn, shows curiosity about Rick's past and who he associated with before. After a moment of silence, she says that even with the rush in forming the contract, that's no excuse not to get to know each other better. Soon after, she begins to philosophize about relationships, saying it's common for couples to get excited early, get married, and then end up disappointed with each other. Rick, confused, wonders where she got that kind of idea. The dungeon spirit, embarrassed, tries to justify her previous comment by saying that she and Rick have a codependent relationship since they are together in this. Rick smiles and suggests they should get to know each other better from now on. They exchange sincere looks while the monsters watch, saying there's plenty of time to strengthen that connection. Yuri hugs Rick tightly and admits she was wrong, confessing that her behavior was caused by jealousy. Rick reassures her, saying it's all right. Meanwhile, the monsters around react naturally, as if they were already used to this kind of drama. Rick then decides to focus on the next step, synthesizing a rank A monster. At the same time, in another place, an intense battle begins. During a fierce confrontation, one of the fighters becomes desperate upon realizing his ability is not activating, questioning if he forgot some condition or if something is wrong with his technique. But Alan Cole, confident and fierce, interrupts the doubt with disdain. He firmly introduces himself as the hero and arrogantly challenges the opponent, ready to dominate the fight. Alan proudly recalls his glorious past. He was recognized by the king, survived 9 near-death situations, and was never defeated. He describes himself as someone who fears no death, and says this brought him a revelation. Observing others, he notices how many were so scared of death they couldn't even face him. In his mind, this places him on a higher level, as he continues advancing confidently and undefeated. During the confrontation, Alan bursts into fury, shouting that everyone around him is incompetent. His companion tries to calm him down, but Alan is overwhelmed by anger and frustration. Amid the chaos, something is thrown and sticks into the ground with force. Victor surrenders after almost being hurt by Alan and questions if he really was trying to kill him. Despite the tense atmosphere, Victor asks him to calm down. Yuri tries to interrupt the argument, but Alan tells her to shut up, still irritated. Then she reveals that Mary has disappeared, shocking Alan and the others with the sudden news. Alan tries to hide his concern about Mary's disappearance, telling everyone to forget her, even though he admits she never disappeared without warning. Yuri tries to justify her importance, but others in the group downplay the situation, saying there are other healers around. Meanwhile, a mysterious man appears, and with a sarcastic smile, taunts, "What kind of person would board a sinking ship?" suggesting there is more behind the situation and that the group is in decline. Alan, annoyed, asks what he wants. The man mocks Alan sarcastically, implying that the way he is now, he wouldn't be able to lead or conquer an SSS-ranked dungeon, much less form a new group in the future. Alan reacts angrily, but the man continues, saying even someone strong like him can be easily replaced. Finally, he turns the taunt around, making clear that the same doubts and weaknesses apply to Alan himself, the hero. Alan kneels before the royal throne, reflecting on the title of hero, given only to adventurers who exceed standards. Despite the prestige, he knows the king can replace him at any moment, depending on results. When confronted by an unexpected figure, Alan is surprised to hear he is in a delicate position, making clear that his reputation and status hang by a thread. Mary returns to the group after her disappearance, explaining she got lost while collecting herbs. Despite some members warmly welcoming her back, Alan remains cold, saying she only avoided the work of finding a replacement. Without allowing more explanations, he orders everyone to prepare for the next mission. Rick and Yuri continue preparations to synthesize rank A monsters, like King Slime and Arachne. Although the process is similar to lower ranks, breaking down the materials is much more laborious. Since the procedure will take longer, Rick decides to take advantage of the time to expand the dungeons simultaneously. Meanwhile, Yuri watches confidently, certain the Cyclops can handle the brute strength needed. Yuri questions how Rick ended up joining the heroes group. He reveals it all started with a prophecy made by a fortune teller who passed through his village. The woman said that if he went to Alan Cole, he would have the chance to leave his name in history. Though admitting it may sound foolish to believe such a thing, Rick followed the advice, and it changed the course of his life. Rick reflects on his journey, admitting maybe it all started with a baseless prophecy. Still, the desire to change his life and become an alchemist pushed him to act. He recalls that, back then, Alan was proud but not as arrogant as he is now. Yuri is surprised that Alan accepted him into the group, even though he appeared out of nowhere. As they walk through an S-ranked dungeon, Rick thinks maybe Alan kept evolving even after mastering his skills. The group faces a critical situation during the mission. Members realize Alan's abilities are not activating, and lack of coordination among them becomes evident. Tension rises when one member suggests their only option is to retreat. Stubborn Alan refuses and reacts aggressively, ignoring warnings from companions. The atmosphere deteriorates quickly, showing the team is far from united. The group debates their current condition and the possibility of facing the dungeon master. One member expresses genuine concern, saying they would not survive that situation. Alan, however, reacts with disdain, accusing others of cowardice and lack of determination. Tension explodes when Fitz tries to warn them about the risks and recklessness of moving forward. In the middle of the conflict, a creature approaches from the shadows, and Fitz impulsively charges alone to confront the danger, ignoring the rest of the group. Fitz advances alone against the creature, but is quickly attacked. The enemy hits him with fast, brutal blows, opening severe wounds. The group watches in shock as Fitz falls, badly injured. The creature jumps to the offensive, and the impact freezes everyone momentarily, faced with the sudden violence. Something abnormal begins happening in the center of the field. An unusual reaction emits strange noises and intense tremors, leaving everyone confused and alarmed. Rick and the dungeon spirit watch attentively, not understanding the phenomenon's origin. Meanwhile, Mary and Fitz are also surprised by the situation. Amid the chaos, the other warrior taunts Fitz, insinuating he now has a reason to leave the group. Alan remains silent, clearly shaken. Alan looks at the injured Fitz with disdain. He declares he will replace him as soon as they leave, claiming Fitz is finished as a warrior and group member. Even being warned by a companion, Alan continues, saying no one will be able to replace the leg Fitz lost. As tension rises, the ground cracks slightly. Alan concludes that all this was caused by Fitz's physical and emotional weakness, implying he will never keep up with the group. A mysterious female figure emerges from the waters, emanating a threatening presence that surprises Rick and his companion. Meanwhile, Alan, filled with anger and contempt, declares he doesn't want incompetent people like Rick in his group. The scene is interrupted by a sudden impact in the water, marking the dramatic arrival of the new character. The newly appeared girl looks around confused, not understanding where she is. Her expression changes to a slight enigmatic smile. Meanwhile, Rick's companion stares at her in surprise, then goes into shock upon realizing another mysterious woman has appeared in their nest, further complicating the situation. The newly synthesized girl appears, showing no shame. Rick, surprised and unsure how to react, is stunned by her perfect human appearance, even knowing she was born as a monster through synthesis. Rick tries to justify himself after being reprimanded for looking at the girl. The newly born synthesized girl magically dresses herself with ease, surprising everyone. Her naturalness and ability to dress herself raise even more doubts about her nature. Rick, impressed, begins to question what kind of creature she really is. Rick introduces himself as Rick Elrod and reveals he is the alchemist responsible for creating the girl. Confused by the revelation, she questions her existence and begins to wonder what exactly she is, unable to fully comprehend her origin or purpose. The girl enters an existential crisis, questioning her origin, purpose, and even the very existence of the world around her. She doesn't understand why she is there, where her consciousness comes from, or what she truly is. Meanwhile, Rick watches surprised, realizing she possesses something unusual. Yuri comments that dungeon monsters usually have no ego or self-awareness, which makes the case of this girl completely out of the ordinary. The girl confronts Rick desperately, demanding an answer about the reason for her existence. She calls him creator and even God, believing he should be able to give her meaning. Pressured, Rick finds himself speechless, unable to provide a clear explanation. Tension rises as even Yuri is called upon to respond, while the confusion about the new creature's identity and purpose only grows. Yuri answers proudly and lightly, saying she lives only to serve Rick, calling him her master and explaining she helped create the dungeon alongside him. The new girl listens silently and watches carefully, showing no clear emotion. In the end, she presses her own chest, reflecting on the answer, while the group watches her reaction, waiting to see if it satisfies her. After a small disagreement, the newly created girl, irritated without clear reason, ends up pulling Yuri's clothes, causing an embarrassing scene. Embarrassed, Yuri runs to cover herself and anxiously asks if Rick saw anything. Sweating and nervous, he avoids her gaze and denies, trying to leave the situation as quickly as possible. Yuri, jealous, starts arguing with Rick, insinuating that he was excited for their first night together. The conversation quickly turns into a mess, with Yuri threatening to undress to prove her point. Meanwhile, the newly created girl watches everything coldly and directly, reminding that she doesn't even know who she is or where she is. The tension between comedy and existential drama creates a contrast among the characters. Rick begins to talk about his past, recalling that he was once just an ordinary, purposeless alchemist. Everything changed when he arrived at that place. There, he met Yuri, synthesized monsters, and together they created the dungeon. It was during that process that he finally understood his place in the world and what he could truly do. Rick extends his hand to the newly created girl, showing a welcoming smile. He reassures her that, with time, she will understand who she really is. Until then, she can call the dungeon home. Introducing himself again, he proudly declares he is the master of that place. The girl, still confused, accepts Rick's gesture with a slight touch, beginning her new journey alongside them. The newly created girl decides to call Rick father, saying it's the least she can do out of respect since he created her. Then, she looks at Yuri and asks if she can also call her mother, since she helped in the process. The situation generates surprise and confusion, with Yuri becoming embarrassed and Rick unsure how to react, while the girl insists she's just being fair by recognizing both as her creators. The new girl, now treating Rick and Yuri as parents, asks what her name is, requesting something worthy and appropriate. Yuri gets excited about the idea of them being a family and praises her daughter for being so understanding. Rick, surprised and a little nervous, admits he already had a name in mind for her. Rick chooses the name Cruz for the newly created girl, explaining he was inspired by a homunculus from old alchemical literature. Yuri praises his choice, saying it's kind of him. Cruz repeats the name thoughtfully, reflecting on the true purpose of alchemy, to uncover the mysteries of life and challenge the domains of gods. While Rick explained the meaning of the name Cruz, the girl interrupts upon noticing something strange being displayed in a magic orb. The image draws everyone's attention. Cruz, serious, asks if they really don't care about what's being shown. The scene then reveals a chained arm being cut, indicating possible imminent danger. Rick realizes the invaders have managed to defeat a rank A monster, surprising him at a moment how quickly rumors about the place have spread. Meanwhile, Yuri informs that enemies are advancing through a newly created section of the dungeon, where debris and traps are not yet properly positioned. Facing the situation, Rick decides to call reinforcements from another area and starts searching for the communication tool to act quickly. Cruz asks Rick if she should kill the invading humans, leaving both him and Yuri surprised by the coldness of the proposal. Observing the situation, she evaluates the enemies and decides that if it's only those, she can handle them alone. Determined, she runs toward the enemy group, confident in her strength. Rick and Yuri watch Cruz leave, worried if she can handle the situation alone. Meanwhile, the enemies underestimate her childish appearance, but one warns the group not to be deceived. Then, Cruz starts fighting with speed and precision, surprising the opponents right in the first move. Cruz easily eliminates one of the enemies with a precise strike, leaving the rest of the group in shock. They barely react, surprised by the unexpected strength of the girl. With a cold and confident look, she observes the adversaries and sarcastically comments that they are more fragile than she imagined. In a luxurious hall, two nobles discuss the hero, criticizing his lack of dedication. While one bites an apple disdainfully, the other mentions that the group has already failed 7 times that month alone, trying to conquer a dungeon. The situation generates frustration and concern, showing that the hero's reputation is declining. The nobles continue discussing the hero's situation. One proposes giving him money, worried about Senate pressure, and the possibility of other countries taking advantage of the current weakness. Despite the criticism, they recognize the hero's past achievements. In the end, one decides to give him one last chance to prove his worth. A new dungeon, rapidly growing, catches attention. It's near the capital and has nearly annihilated an unprepared adventurer group. Rumors say the monsters there are much stronger than the dungeon's indicated level. Therefore, a possible confrontation is being considered as the ideal test to measure the hero's true value. The dungeon begins to shake, signaling the start of something dangerous. Meanwhile, a revelation emerges. The newly created girl is actually a true ancestor vampire, a being born as a vampire and not transformed. Her power is classified as SS rank, a level far above the common. Now, it remains to be seen if the hero will be able to prove his worth against an enemy of this caliber, or if the dungeon will only show how truly threatening it is. Rick is shocked upon realizing the true power level of the newly created girl, SS rank. He and Yuri conclude that with someone like her by their side, they can finally rival the hero. The girl, smiling with a sharp and proud look, declares that everything is settled and calls Rick Daddy. The group begins to see new hope and also an imminent turning point. Cruz demonstrates her overwhelming strength by easily defeating several enemies with an indifferent expression. Her movements are fast, precise, and brutal, leaving everyone unconscious within seconds. Rick, watching from afar, smiles impressed with the result, realizing that the most powerful weapon they could have created is now on their side. The group now enjoyed a comfortable and well-equipped base. With points accumulating quickly and Cruz's constant help, the place was becoming ideal for living. While exploring the rooms, the protagonist expressed satisfaction with the new facilities, especially with tools he never imagined having access to while part of Alan's old group. He saw there a new beginning, full of resources and possibilities. The protagonist showed concern about the increasing level of the invaders. He admitted to using part of the dungeon's resources for his own projects, but only the surplus. The elf suggested that, with Cruz present, dealing with enemies would be easy, but this only reinforced his unease. Depending too much on her could be risky. Despite Cruz's strength being so great that even heroes would struggle against her, he hesitated, recognizing there were still risks. Cruz appeared excited and proud as she said that since she was born, she had already faced various invaders with ease. The protagonist assured her he never forced her into anything, highlighting that she had always been willing to go on missions. Cruz, full of confidence, said all enemies felt like child's play, and expressed a desire for more challenging opponents in the future. Despite the light mood, the elf remained thoughtful, beginning to wonder if she was just overthinking her concerns. A new character appeared, Albert Rido. He arrived enthusiastic, introducing himself eagerly and saying he was honored to have been called directly by Alan. It was mentioned that Albert was known as a standout attacker in Marco's group, or at least that's what people said. Meanwhile, an imposing and threatening figure watched, raising suspicions that something more serious might be about to happen. The elf tried to stay calm, but showed some concern about the unusual delay. While Albert tried to appear confident and excited, other group members showed skepticism and disdain. Some wondered how long he would last, implying he was brought in through some advantageous deal. One of them mocked the group's current performance, provoking tense reactions. Albert, on the other hand, tried to keep things light, saying he would bring new energy to the team. However, tension grew when one member lost patience with his speech. The atmosphere in the group was direct and strict. Alan emphasized that here actions mattered more than words. Everyone needed to prove their worth in practice. It was announced that the next morning they would face a new dungeon, and all had to be at their peak strength. The group maintained a cold stance, no space for jokes, making it clear the environment was demanding and had no tolerance for weakness. The group received an alert about a new invasion in the dungeon. The protagonist commented that attacks had been frequent but remained calm. Cruz showed excitement and readiness to act, receiving the mission confidently. Meanwhile, the elf watched everything from a distance, using magic to monitor the invaders' movements. Though she tried to convince herself everything was under control, something in the enemy's route made her hesitate, awakening a slight distrust. The invading group advanced through the dungeon, alert to the abnormal silence of the place. One member warned about the possibility of traps scattered around, and everyone stayed on guard. While analyzing the area, one asked for a golden potion, showing caution. Although the traps seemed easy to understand, the environment still inspired care. They concluded that there were fewer monsters and more traps because of their presence. Recognizing that the dungeon had a history and required constant attention, Cruz intercepted the invaders with a sadistic smile and absolute confidence. She quickly assessed the group, identifying 5 enemies. Without hesitation, she attacked with brutal force, knocking one down easily. With a crazed look, she warned she intended to have some fun before finishing everyone off, making it clear she was not just there to defend the dungeon. She wanted to enjoy the fight. During the confrontation, one of the invaders took advantage of an opening and threw a potion at Cruz. The vial exploded in a bright flash, momentarily blinding everyone around. The elf and Cruz reacted surprised by the sudden glow. Irritated by the trick, Cruz became furious, showing she would not let it go easily. While the battle's tension rapidly increased, the invaders' assault continued with a series of coordinated attacks. One raised a wall of earth at high speed, surprising Cruz and throwing one of her allies far away. Cruz, annoyed by the interruptions, tried to counterattack but was caught in a surprise move that trapped her in an underground snare. The situation quickly spiraled out of control, and the enemy's strength started to reveal itself as more dangerous than expected. Even wounded and visibly shaken, Cruz decided to keep fighting. As she prepared, she was caught off guard by a trap with flying creatures and a smoke explosion that impaired her vision. The invaders watched confused, not understanding if she was fleeing or advancing on purpose. Cruz, with teary eyes, admitted she couldn't see anything, while one enemy suspected she was deliberately throwing herself into the traps. Everyone was surprised to see Cruz being stopped from advancing. She was not being defeated by the invaders, but trapped by the dungeon's own scattered traps. Meanwhile, the enemy group realized that, despite her power, she was vulnerable at that moment, and decided to advance quickly. The dungeon master grew anxious about the situation, fearing the enemies would get past Cruz and invade the room where they were. With the situation worsening, the protagonist revealed the dungeon had been expanded with traps and simple routes to buy time. However, he realized this would not be enough. In the dark and silence, he thought about his excessive dependence on Cruz, noticing he had neglected something essential: a safe escape route. The tension rose as footsteps approached, signaling their time was running out. The invaders discovered that Cruz had been affected by a blindness trap. Taking advantage, they advanced confidently, sure she wouldn't see them at that distance. The group stayed united, preparing for the next move as the sound of a powerful roar echoed down the corridor. Something huge was about to be unleashed, and tension grew with the creature's approach. The dungeon's powerful Cyclops was released to face the invaders. One ally believed it would handle the task, but the dungeon master realized they had underestimated the enemies. He warned that leaving the Cyclops alone against the group was reckless. Soon, the Cyclops entered combat but was surrounded and attacked by all at once. Quickly overwhelmed, while the sound of destruction echoed through the place, the Cyclops tried to resist fiercely, but the invaders were prepared. One noted the creature was tougher than expected. Still, the group stayed calm, remembering they were under the effect of the golden potion, which gave them a powerful boost. Confident, they coordinated a decisive attack, culminating in a devastating explosion that struck the Cyclops directly. The combined force began to turn the battle in the invaders' favor. The Cyclops fell defeated with a crash, badly injured and too weak to continue. The enemy group, despite their wounds, confirmed everyone was fine. The leader acknowledged the battle had been tough, but all had held out. With the path clear, they prepared to advance further into the dungeon, while the defenders watched silently, shocked at the giant's fall. Even still blind, Cruz returned to the fight, surprising the invaders with her resilience. They believed they still had the advantage and saw a chance to attack her before she fully recovered her sight. One enemy rushed forward quickly but underestimated Cruz. In the next instant, a violent attack caused an explosion, surprising everyone and stopping the group's advance. Cruz, still affected by blindness, began to sniff the environment. She commented on the unpleasant but recognizable smell. The invaders watched, confused, until they realized too late what she was doing. Using the Cyclops' blood scent, Cruz managed to track her opponents. The revelation shocked the group, especially Marco, who realized she was guiding her attacks with precision, relying only on her sense of smell. Cruz advanced with accuracy and speed, guided only by the blood's scent. Her strike was precise, instantly knocking down one invader. The rest of the group was stunned, realizing too late that she didn't need to see to be deadly. Marco, with a frustrated and surprised expression, understood they had completely underestimated the girl, now determined and relentless, even at a disadvantage. After the intense battle, Cruz looked at the wounded but still alive Cyclops and recognized its toughness. Then she sincerely thanked it for saving her during the fight. The elf, relieved, noticed the Cyclops was all right. Cruz admitted she had underestimated the creature, acknowledging its value. The mood calmed for a moment, with a feeling of mutual respect among the dungeon's defenders. After the confrontation, the dungeon master admitted his mistakes. He confessed he had trusted too much in his allies' abilities and had failed to act based on his own judgment. Yuri comforted him, reminding him that depending on others' strength was okay, especially being responsible for everyone there. Touched by the trust placed in him, he decided he had to use his own strength, not just to protect himself, but to protect all those with him. Albert ran desperately through the dungeon corridors, shocked by one group member's insane decision. He panicked when he realized the man had charged alone, enraged, against a group of cockatrices, rank S monsters. Even a novice would never make such a reckless move. The danger was extreme, and the situation seemed completely out of control. Albert ran through the corridors calling for his missing companions, completely disoriented. Without finding a response, he found himself surrounded by a group of cockatrices, huge and threatening creatures. Scared and alone, he realized too late the danger around him. Desperation took over as he understood he had fallen straight into the beast's ambush. Alan informed the group that he had seen the cockatrices heading in the same direction as Albert. Rido was alarmed but soon realized the situation was being used as a distraction. One member proposed ignoring Albert and moving forward while he kept the monsters occupied. The suggestion to abandon him shocked Rido, who immediately reacted, not believing they were seriously considering leaving him behind. Matilda began to writhe in pain, throwing the group into panic. Without understanding what was happening, they quickly examined her. One member recognized the symptoms. She had inhaled cockatrice venom. The situation was serious. If nothing was done, Matilda would die within 6 hours. Tension grew even more, as the group now faced a race against time to save her. The group discussed the severity of the situation. With the toxicity being rank S, it was impossible to create an antidote with current resources. Not even Mary's healing magic would be strong enough. Frustration increased, and one member harshly criticized Alan, saying his rush to act had put them in this position. Despite the tension, no one dared confront him directly, showing the lack of clear leadership among the survivors. The group clashed over how they had gotten into this situation. One regretted Rick and Fitz's absence, who could have helped or prevented Alan's impulsive decisions. While Rido blamed himself, trying to understand where everything went wrong, Mary suggested the most urgent action. Take Matilda back to the city before the poison killed her. The tension remained high, but the priority shifted to the companion's survival. The atmosphere heated as Mary confronted the decision to move on without helping Albert. She shouted that it was not time for leadership disputes because someone's life was at risk. Even amid the tension, she recalled what Dorma had said, appealing to the other's conscience. Her determination and frustration were clear, forcing Rido to react. With a serious expression, he agreed. They could not waste more time. After the discussion, Rido took charge and asked everyone to retreat for now. Though reluctant, Alan accepted, sensing the seriousness of the request. Mary thanked Victor for his help, and he responded calmly, showing his commitment to the group. With the decision made, Rido ordered Victor to carry Matilda, and they all prepared to leave. United by urgency, they put aside conflicts and focused on saving their companion. Despite intense efforts with potions and healing magic, Matilda did not survive the venom. 2 days and 3 nights later, her life ended. Even with an antidote being discovered, it was too late. Upon returning, Alan asked about her condition, but the answer was direct and painful. She hadn't made it. The news hit him immediately, leaving a heavy silence in the air. Devastated by Matilda's death, Mary could no longer bear the situation. She declared she could not stay in that group, recalling Rick's loss and Fitz's disappearance. For her, it was all too much. Victor tried to console her, but Alan remained distant, walking without reacting. In tears, Mary shouted, questioning if Alan still had a heart, unable to understand his coldness amid so much pain. Consumed by frustration, Alan lamented failing to save Matilda, but revealed he was already focused on finding replacements for the group. Furious with refusals and other adventurers' lack of respect, he began to question if his reputation had lost value. His thoughts turned to Mary, feeling offended for being challenged by her, someone he considered just a healer. His anger grew as he recalled how she had confronted him, fueling his resentment even more. Taken over by rage, Alan exploded when he felt underestimated by everyone around him. In a fury, he broke something nearby and stormed through the streets. On the way, he crossed paths with a mysterious man accompanied by a shadowy figure. Alan confronted him, but the man remained calm and introduced himself as Alfred Blythe. Impatient and aggressive, Alan told him to get out of the way without wanting to talk, leaving a tense atmosphere between them. Even in the face of Alan's hostility, Alfred remains calm. He reveals that he is there to deliver a letter from the king himself. The revelation catches Alan by surprise, causing his attitude to change immediately. Shocked, he repeats in a low voice, incredulous, "The king?" The atmosphere changes drastically, with tension giving way to unexpected curiosity and seriousness. Alan reads aloud the letter sent by the king. Despite recognition for his past achievements, the content reveals that his recent failures in conquering dungeons have exceeded the tolerance limit. The letter informs that the Senate is considering officially revoking his hero title. Alan reacts with shock and indignation upon hearing the news. Despite the threat of losing his title, Alan is informed that there is still a chance for redemption. If he manages to conquer some dungeons, he can keep his status. Surprised by the apparent simplicity of the proposal, he soon realizes there is an implicit condition. The first suggested target is precisely the dungeon that has recently attracted attention, the same one where he failed before. Tension returns to the group, and Mary reacts with concern. The dungeon master, still undecided about his next creations, reveals that he is focused on synthesizing strong monsters, but is beginning to consider more efficient strategies to manage the place. With an expanded catalog of options, he feels the weight of decisions and decides to ask Yuri for advice, recognizing her experience and good sense. She is surprised, but listens attentively. Yuri is moved by being entrusted with such an important responsibility. She promises to help with everything she can, feeling proud to be useful to the master. He thanks her with a smile, and together they decide to assess the dungeon's current state, beginning a new phase of adjustments and improvements. While analyzing the dungeon's structure, Yuri suggests several improvements. She proposes dividing the dungeon into floors to make exploration harder and applying buffs to monsters according to each floor's environment. The master, reflecting on his initial simplicity, accepts the ideas and begins adjusting the setup. The conversation becomes more technical, showing the importance of planning and strategy in defending the place. The dungeon floor is transformed into a forest, surprising the master. Yuri explains that this is part of the field change, allowing the placement of stronger monsters in the natural environment and making it harder for invaders to advance. Furthermore, the new terrain facilitates the defense of the next floor. The conversation ends with a check on point consumption, suggesting everything is going well with the available resources. Yuri reveals that the dungeon received 25,000 DP points from defeated adventurers, raising it to rank E. The master is impressed to see the accumulated total, which already reaches 36,200 DP, even after considerable spending on field changes and expansion. She then explains that from rank E onward, it will be possible to build facilities that generate DP automatically, which excites the group even more. While the master and Yuri discuss dungeon improvements, the newly created girl observes and decides she will also do her part. Even without understanding alchemy or management, she chooses to focus on what she knows: training. Enthusiastically, she leads the small group of monsters, determined to strengthen them. The master encourages them with a smile, only asking that they don't overexert themselves. The protagonist reflects on how challenging himself with new things like alchemy and dungeon management seems to fit his nature. He remembers a seer from his hometown who recognized his talent and spirit, encouraging him to seek a certain man to achieve something great. Now, far from Alan and following his own path, he wonders if he will also manage to accomplish something significant by the end of this journey. Alan remains convinced of his own strength and refuses to accept the possibility of losing the hero title, claiming he is still capable. Meanwhile, Albert tries to intervene in the conversation, declaring that the nation's future should be entrusted to him. Alfred, however, stresses that the situation goes beyond Alan, directly affecting the country's course. Despite this, Alan insists there is only one possible path, making clear his refusal to accept any interference, even when asked respectfully. Alan is surprised by the appearance of a hooded man, who praises his rigidity but highlights the importance of flexibility in youth. Upon revealing his face, the man mentions Rick, the young man Alan had sent, and directly asks about his whereabouts, making it clear he is suspicious about something after noticing the absence of news about him. Alan recognizes the hooded man, surprised he is still alive. The visitor sarcastically comments on Alan's aged appearance, while he himself keeps the same cadaverous look as always. Mary, confused, asks who the man is, and Victor realizes it is the first time she has seen him. The presence of that stranger begins to raise suspicions among the group. Albert Grace is revealed as a mysterious alchemist and royal advisor who has served the court since the time of the current king's grandfather. Despite his title, he often travels to remote regions, seeking promising young adventurers as a pastime. He always appears at decisive moments for the nation. Mary, intrigued, asks why Alan kept Rick in his group, even though they didn't get along. Victor explains that, besides the lack of support members at the time, there were other reasons behind the choice, indicating that Albert may have influenced that decision. Rick only joined the group on Albert Grace's direct suggestion. Even being considered useless by Alan, he was kept on the team just to preserve Albert's reputation, who was too respected to be contradicted. While some think this was just a rumor, the way everything unfolded makes it clear Alan was forced to accept Rick due to political pressure. In the end, not even Albert himself seems to remember the boy's name properly. Alan explodes in frustration in front of Albert, making it clear he has already expelled Rick from the group. He says that despite having supported him for a long time, the boy never showed anything useful. Victor and the others also agree Rick had no notable achievements. Alan criticizes the idea of potential, saying they had no time to wait for something that might never happen. For him, keeping Rick in the group was just a useless burden. Albert responds calmly, laughing at Alan's impatience. He admits he has a habit of investing too much time in potential, but says this is part of alchemists' nature, who live by careful observation and analysis. Finally, he firmly states that patience is essential in everything, leaving Alan without arguments. A warrior suddenly appears and attacks, reprimanding Alan for his rushed decisions. Alan is surprised to recognize him. Albert watches the situation calmly, acknowledging that recklessness is a common trait among adventurers, but maintains a critical tone towards Alan's impulsiveness. Albert criticizes Alan's attitude, saying that, as a hero, he should know how to differentiate courage from recklessness. Meanwhile, Rick is in the laboratory working with alchemy. Yuri approaches curiously, and he explains he is creating something not in the catalog, but managed to get the materials on his own during work. While the group reflects on the final advance in conquering the dungeon, they realize that resources and energy are at their limit. Rick poses the question, what would they do in that situation? Yuri hesitates, and Rick concludes that, even though it's difficult, the best would be to retreat. He reinforces that an adventure is only worth it if everyone is alive, although he knows not everyone thinks with such reason. Rick considers the harsh reality of expeditions. If they retreat, the dungeon structure may change completely, rendering all gathered information useless. Moreover, he remembers adventurers are not allies. Sabotage and disputes are common. While resting, another group may take credit for the conquest. The decision proves harder than it seems. Rick acknowledges adventurers are often forced to keep going, even on dangerous bets. Yuri fears the consequences, remembering the risk of irreversible injuries. Even with victory, they might lose companions. Rick then reveals his ace up his sleeve, a crucial ally who can turn the game. Rick shows a golden potion, the same used by adventurers who previously invaded the dungeon. Yuri immediately recognizes it and questions his intentions. Rick, with a mysterious smile, makes it clear he has a specific plan in mind, keeping the mystery in the air. Rick decides to use the golden potion to heal the Cyclops. Then he asks Cruz to face it seriously, just once. The girl hesitates for a moment, but accepts, intrigued by Rick's proposed experiment. Cruz accepts the proposal without hesitation, even warning she might end up killing the Cyclops in the heat of combat. Rick, unbothered, imposes a challenge. The Cyclops will fight under the golden potion's effect as a disadvantage. Cruz doubts this will really help, but still prepares for the confrontation, stating she is just obeying an order from her father. Yuri watches anxiously, unsure if this will really work. The Cyclops hesitates, sweating nervously. Cruz, confident, says she will end everything quickly and without causing pain. Rick just smiles and asks Yuri to watch carefully as he is about to show the power of the golden potion. Cruz confidently launches the attack, but as soon as she hits the Cyclops, something unexpected happens. Instead of easily defeating it, she is surprised by an abnormal strength. The Cyclops, strengthened by the golden potion, barely reacts to the blow. Cruz feels something strange in her body, while the Cyclops looks frightened, not understanding what just happened. Even healed by the golden potion, the Cyclops starts to feel exhaustion. Cruz, fast and ruthless, pressures with precise strikes, keeping the enemy under control. She notices that, despite the regeneration, the monster's body already shows signs of fatigue. With that, Cruz uses the resistance advantage to unbalance the fight, testing the limits of the potion's power. Cruz prepares to finish the Cyclops with a final blow. Yuri worries about the possibility of it dying, but the master reassures her, asking her to watch carefully. The Cyclops, even at a disadvantage, faces the end with a firm posture. Cruz, confident, leaps to deliver the decisive attack, ending the fight with coldness and absolute control. At the moment Cruz tries to finish the Cyclops, something unexpected happens. The creature, which should be weakened, reacts with brutal force and surprising speed, exchanging blows with her evenly. Cruz is impressed to realize the Cyclops is matching her moves, even after taking the potion. The fight, which seemed decided, turns into a balanced confrontation. Cruz gets annoyed at being interrupted, but the master orders her and the Cyclops to stop. He observes that the experiment was a success because the goal was not to win the fight, but to test the potion's effect. Even though displeased, Cruz tries to continue, but he reassures her that the result was already enough. The Cyclops, still standing, also seems exhausted but at peace with the fight's end. The master explains that he wanted to test how the Cyclops would perform against someone clearly stronger like Cruz. He reveals the golden potion reacts to crisis situations, amplifying all the user's abilities for a short period. Despite the cost and difficulty in making it, its impact is immense. Since its invention, adventurers' survival rates have increased by 40%. In summary, it is a potion made to reverse critical combat situations. The master decides to equip all dungeon monsters with the golden potion. He explains that although adventurers overcome monsters with strategy and teamwork, the monster's advantage in numbers and terrain is already significant. If they also gain high resistance, even well-coordinated groups will have difficulties. Based on the Cyclops experiment, the conclusion is that even mid-level or higher adventurers will struggle to advance. The protagonist concludes that his dungeon, with strategic use of golden potions and flexible force combinations, is something only an alchemist with broad skills could create. To mark this identity, he suggests the name Alchemist Dungeon, surprising Yuri, who realizes the place didn't even have a name yet. After being subtly manipulated by Albert, Alan agrees to participate in the new dungeon expedition. The way the old man stirred his pride made him believe he was making the decision on his own. Now, with the team gathered for the next push, he is instructed to cooperate with the new members, even though still suspicious of everything. Alan is introduced to the new members of his team. The first is Christopher Perez, a rank A mage, extremely flattering and exaggerated in his speech. The second is Aaron Seeger, also a rank A healing mage, who is much more reserved and direct. Both are there to support the next mission in the dungeon. But Alan's cold reception already makes clear the tension among the members. The last member of Alan's new team introduces himself, Tony Richards, someone who already knows Alan and shows a mix of enthusiasm and frustration at finally being by his side on a mission. Tony seems serious and straightforward, but his tone reveals some disappointment with Alan's cold and distant attitude. The new team is complete, but the lack of harmony among the members already indicates possible future conflicts. Tony verbally attacks Alan, saying a hero should be a symbol of hope and victory, and that Alan, by accepting help, became a disgrace to that ideal. He recalls the day he was defeated by Alan in the past, but does not hide his frustration at seeing him now depending on others. Bitterly, he declares Alan is falling. Meanwhile, someone approaches, interrupting the growing tension. Tony presents himself as a rank S hero candidate, holding his sword confidently. He declares he will take on the hero's burden, swearing this proudly. But Alan, irritated by his attitude, immediately retorts that someone limited to rank S has no right to judge him. The tension between them grows, marked by clear rivalry. While Alan shows impatience with the meeting, the old advisor interrupts, saying one more person is yet to join the group. Tony comments that this person should be arriving soon. The scene then shifts to a few hours earlier, indicating something important is about to be revealed, and this new presence may change the conversation's course. While Yuri and the Master watch anxiously through the surveillance orb, they realize an intruder has invaded the dungeon. However, the most surprising thing is the person's speed, so extreme that even the magical tracking system can't keep up. The figure advances, destroying everything in its path, easily defeating the guardian monsters, making it clear it is no ordinary invader. The invader finally reveals his face. He is a young man named Liez Clement, an assassin of rank A. Despite his childlike appearance, his confidence and posture show experience. He analyzes the dungeon with disdain, as if it were something too simple for his level. The Master, upon seeing him, is surprised by the intruder's identity. He did not expect someone so young to be so dangerous. The Master watches in shock as his monsters prove completely useless against Liez's speed. Even with the numerical advantage, none of them can stop him. Liez dances among the enemies with ease, as if playing, laughing amid the chaos. His strength and agility are on another level, making clear that common strategies will not work against him. Liez continues to advance without any difficulty, precisely dodging all attacks. The monsters react, but their blows don't come close. The master observes, unable to understand how someone can completely ignore counterattacks. The enemy is not only fast, but seems to predict every movement with absurd accuracy. The character calmly observes the monsters and realizes that they are not as impressive as expected. After assessing the situation, he decides he has seen enough and resolves to leave the place for now. The character decides to leave by jumping out the window, leaving the others behind. Meanwhile, one of the men admits that facing him would be suicide, recognizing he would be easily defeated. The girl beside him reacts indignantly, but he only smiles, accepting his own limitation. While observing the enemies, the group notices they avoided direct confrontation, but still managed to react perfectly to all strategies. They conclude the enemies must have some special ability. One comments that, even with everyone on the field, victory chances would be uncertain. The girl highlights that the biggest loss was revealing their secret card. The invader, on the other hand, makes it clear the true goal was not to attack, but to gather information. The group concludes that if such skilled adventurers start attacking frequently, they will need to reformulate the entire dungeon structure. Given this, they prepare to review plans from the beginning. The group gathers around a table with the map of a recent dungeon. Although they did not reach the deepest floor, they share what they managed to explore. One member praises the effort, while another questions the reason for the prior recognition. The leader replies, there are several reasons, but hesitates before explaining the main one. The girl explains that although stronger dungeons exist, the one in question is the hardest to understand. She compares it to an evolution phase. More developed dungeons follow predictable patterns, but those still growing are full of errors and surprises. This makes them harder to plan against, like fighting someone unpredictable who doesn't follow common strategies. The group comments that the dungeon seems to be used experimentally, causing many casualties and generating rumors. The leader notes that the dungeon master has a unique approach, almost like playing a game. He predicts that when a real invasion is attempted, the enemy will realize their intentions and change the whole structure again, making the current exploration valuable only as a reference. The group confirms the mission was no joke. The goal was to obtain information. The focus was not only on the dungeon layout, but also on understanding the personality of the master behind it. Understanding his personality and quirks, they believe they can anticipate his actions, even if the structure changes constantly. One member expresses the desire that the group decides on its own when to face the dungeon. Another argues they still need more investigations, prioritizing harder dungeons for now. Although understanding the point, the first makes it clear he doesn't want to be left out of decisions. He accepts investigations, but warns that if they continue acting from the shadows, they will need his permission first. The hero reminds his companion that even if temporarily, he is the group leader and received the royal order. Irritated, he demands more respect and caution in decisions. The other accepts the warning and promises to keep it in mind. Shortly after, everyone gathers and someone initiates the next phase, indicating they are ready to proceed. The older man starts the meeting about the group's first dungeon conquest. One member suggests discussing the plan more calmly. In response, all members show confident and determined expressions, while a girl, emotional and silent, seems relieved by the group's unity. A girl complains bored that there has been no movement of adventurers in the dungeon. Meanwhile, they comment that the person responsible has been locked in his room for 3 days without explanation. Even though meals are being delivered normally, the situation begins to worry the other residents. While the man remains focused planning the dungeon and adjusting traps, the girl loses patience with boredom. Furious, she shouts that she will freak out if something isn't done and decides to drag her father out of the room. Ignoring warnings not to bother him, she advances determined, ready to force him out. Upon invading the room, the girl finds her father unconscious on the table, surrounded by vials, plates, and papers. In panic, she screams thinking he is dead, causing immediate commotion. The man awakens slowly and asks where he is. The girls, relieved, run to him emotionally. One of them throws herself on top of him impulsively, completely surprising him right after waking up. The girls reprimand the man for spending 3 days without rest, surviving only on homemade potions. Worried, they remind him he is still human and without eating could die. He is warned that if he falls, everything around will collapse as well. In the end, they sincerely ask him to take better care of himself. One of the girls reminds the man that it's time to donate blood to her, and he admits he forgot. Another reacts indignantly, saying it's absurd to take blood from someone malnourished. They agree he needs to eat properly before anything else. While discussing the quality of human blood, the man, exhausted, wonders if he's being cared for or just treated as a nutrient source. The girls decide to prepare a meal to help the master recover, taking on the task enthusiastically. He thanks them and promises to rest until then, trusting them. However, once alone, he begins to doubt if they really know how to cook, becoming thoughtful and worried about the result. Determined to help the master, the woman gathers various ingredients and calls a real team of monsters to cook. Confident, she says that with so much help, something good must come out. The daughter, however, asks what exactly they will prepare, making it clear enthusiasm might not be accompanied by a plan. While trying to decide what to cook, the girl remembers she never really thought about what humans eat. She recalls an old conversation with her father, where he compared alchemy to cooking, mixing several ingredients to create something completely new. For him, the concept of cooking was similar to alchemy, which surprises the daughter, who realizes he might not have known much about food either. The girl has a sudden idea. If cooking is like alchemy, then they can use the father's instruments to prepare the food. Excited, she declares that with the right tools and some adjustments, they will surely be able to create something. The other watches silently, surprised by the bold proposal. Excited, the woman agrees with the idea and says it makes sense. If potions affect the human body, then food, which also nourishes, can be made the same way. She assumes using alchemy for cooking should work, even if no one there really knows how to use alchemy. In the end, she decides that as long as it's not toxic, it's worth a try. Without knowing exactly what she's doing, the girl gives basic instructions. Cut the ingredients, mix and cook. Confident, she encourages everyone to just imitate what they see, thinking that's enough. With energy and enthusiasm, she starts the chaotic cooking session, along with the monsters. While the dish is still cooking, one of the girls comments that, if it continues like this, their father's stomach will die before the food is ready. Remembering that proper cooking would take half a day on low heat, they decide to speed up the process with a very unconventional plan. Summon a wyvern to use high-level fire and accelerate everything in a few minutes. The wyvern shoots an intense burst of fire directly into the giant pot. The girls watch the process excitedly, confident the extreme heat will speed up the preparation. However, their faces soon turn to shock and despair when they see what is happening inside the pot. The contents of the pot completely evaporate after the intense fire. One of the girls comments that she added a resistance potion, but the steam made her feel strange. While trying to fix the mess, one of the monsters suggests adding salt, believing it's healthy. Another questions if it would be coarse salt, but the biggest among them ignores the warnings and dumps everything at once, completely overdoing it. Despite the dish's reasonable appearance, the real problem now is the taste. One of the girls asks a goblin to taste it. He chews hesitantly, but soon after spits everything out with an expression of pure horror. The girls' reactions show they already expected something disastrous. The final result is disastrous, with a monster fainted on the floor after tasting the dish. Even so, the girl insists on starting over, saying alchemy involves trial and error. The cycle continues with more explosive tests and chaos in the kitchen, while the helpers despair, complaining they will run out of test subjects after so many explosive food trials. After all the confusion and explosions, only debris and exhausted bodies remain. Even so, the man smiles sincerely and thanks them for their effort. He recognizes the feelings behind it all, and that was what touched him most. The two, emotional, also smile, happy to have expressed their dedication. Faced with the chaos left by the cooking attempt, the man, with a resigned smile, only asks them to clean up the whole mess. The two girls, downcast and embarrassed, silently accept the task, ready to deal with the consequences of the alchemy cooking. The group comes across a table filled with various dishes. The cook explains he prepared a meal focused on flavor and texture, since Yuri, being a spirit, doesn't need to eat. For Cruise, he chose dishes with grilled meats, and, as a compliment, added some of his own blood collected earlier. The protagonist reveals he used to cook at parties organized by Alan and saw similarities between alchemy and cooking. He decides to gather everyone for a meal, remembering that, despite their differences, they are companions who fight together. The table fills with varied creatures, all enjoying the food and the moment of unity. The group begins to analyze the current situation. The biggest concern is a high-ranking group that recently sent an assassin. Despite having prevented advancement to the deepest levels, the enemies obtained important information about the monsters and their positioning. At the moment, they don't have resources to completely replace the frontline creatures. While enjoying the meal, the character shows confidence in stating they will eliminate the invaders without difficulties. However, they are warned about a possible scenario where the enemy group splits, with part facing Cruise and the other advancing to the deepest level. If that happens, defeat would be certain. The protagonist stresses the need to prepare for stronger enemies, as depending only on Cruise's brute strength may not be enough. The group discusses strategies to deal with possible invaders. With the dungeon size increasing, it becomes difficult for Cruise to handle everything alone. One suggestion is to expand the dungeon even more, wearing down enemies during exploration and letting monsters finish them off. However, rushing expansion would waste resources, since against such strong enemies it would have little effect. The group concludes what is missing in the dungeon's defense is a true tank, a monster capable of physically blocking enemies and handling several at once. It doesn't need to be offensively strong, but resistant enough not to fall. The idea is to position this creature before the deepest level, allowing it to hold the invaders while Cruise eliminates them all at once. The protagonist recalls his first weapon and decides the next step will be fusion, an essential part of his strategy. Soon after, an imposing monster appears, proclaiming loyalty to the dungeon, signaling the start of a new phase in the defense plan. The group of adventurers advances easily through the rank A dungeon, showing confidence and superiority. One of them comments that he could have handled everything alone, while another observes that Tony didn't even have to draw his sword since they entered. The team clearly doesn't see the place as a real threat. The adventurers comment on the mission's ease, acknowledging they were sent only as reinforcements. One admits he didn't even have time to draw his sword, highlighting the level difference. Despite this, they call the strategy a kind of insurance. One of the more analytical members decides to watch everything closely, while the leader warns not to disrupt their rhythm. After the mission, the adventurers reunite. One praises the group's performance, while another mentions having sought information from the Thieves Guild, considered the best intelligence source in the capital. Despite the provocative tone, the atmosphere is relaxed, but there is a feeling that something relevant was discovered behind the scenes. The group talks about the information obtained from the Thieves Guild. It was revealed that valuable testimonies came from adventurers who survived the dungeon. Although there is concern about using the king's funds with dubious sources, the informant assures that he paid with valuable items instead of money. In light of this, the others accept the explanation without further objections. An older man appears, relaxing among the group, provoking irritation in the others. He claims he has already finished his work and is now there purely for pastime. A woman confronts him with disdain, saying he is nothing but a nuisance and should go back to the palace. The old man, indifferent, replies that he does not care if others will follow the royal orders or not, showing total detachment and confidence. The old man states that his only wish now is to watch how the hero of the new era will rise. In response, he is provoked to just watch silently until he becomes a senile old man. With a calm smile, he accepts the provocation with good humor, making it clear he intends to continue just observing. The atmosphere becomes tense but contained, with attentive and silent looks. The protagonist performs another fusion, this time using a rank A monster as the base. Although using fewer creatures than last time, he bets on quality instead of quantity. Observing the process silently, he wonders if this new creation will bring luck or misfortune. The tension grows as the ritual progresses. From the flaming cauldron emerges a colossal creature, a dragon. Its presence is immediate and overwhelming, leaving the observers in shock. One of the adventurers barely reacts to the sight, recognizing with astonishment that it is a true dragon, a threat of another level, born from the fusion. The group of adventurers gathers to discuss the next steps. They decide that after completing the next dungeon, they will face a greater challenge. The conversation reveals that, with previous expeditions, they began to better understand each other's abilities and cover their weaknesses. One confirms they have already gathered enough information to advance safely. The hero makes it clear he does not want forced companionship and only asks that no one obstruct his path. One group member comments that, even with this attitude, it is right to follow the hero's wishes so he can show his full potential. Despite the cold attitude, the others recognize this approach as the most efficient for the group as a whole. While reflecting with the group, one member comments that his role is not to lead Alan but to avoid opposing him. He acknowledges that the hero's overwhelming strength is what really fascinates people, a force that dominates everything, but is not the same as knowing how to guide others. For the group, this makes Alan the ideal warrior, but not necessarily a leader. During a conversation, Mary is questioned about the real reason she joined the group. Before she can answer, she is urgently called during a battle. An injured ally shouts for her healing as the fight intensifies, interrupting the moment of reflection with the urgency of combat. During the battle, Victor is seriously injured and begins to lose consciousness. Mary tries to help him but hesitates, drawing the attention of the eye patch warrior, who coldly reprimands her. Mary quickly apologizes while another ally also criticizes her expression, showing impatience with her indecision. Mary is coldly reminded that she can be replaced at any moment. Then she tries to explain that she joined as a healing mage, but hesitates and apologizes. Embarrassed, the eye patch warrior mocks the previous question, treating it as something only a novice would do, and stresses that Mary has been there long enough to still doubt her place. Mary finally reveals her true reason for being in the group. She wants to support someone. She talks about a mysterious man, difficult to understand on the outside, but whom she watches closely. Although she acknowledges he is not good with words nor has a leadership profile, she feels the desire to be by his side and offer her support anyway. One character reflects on the devotion the group has for the hero, calling it genuine faith. The eye patch warrior confirms she would do anything for him to be recognized as a true hero. She states that everyone in the group shares the same feeling. Mary, Leitz, and Chris are also willing to do everything for this common goal. In a discreet alley, an exchange of information occurs. An informant delivers a scroll with requested data, receiving thanks in return. He comments on the unusual tastes of the requester, suggesting something strange about the person's interests. In the distance, Mary watches the scene, surprised by what she just witnessed. The informant reveals he was tracking the alchemist who was expelled from Alan's group. Although not hiding, he disappeared after being last seen near the entrance of a forest on the capital's outskirts, the same place where a new dungeon entrance appeared. According to the informant, the alchemist was probably gathering materials, but since then no one has heard from him. Mary listens in shock, processing the connection between the events. The informant reveals that at the same time the alchemist disappeared, the nearby forest began to exhibit strange phenomena. Primitive animals became more active and seemed to be transforming into magical creatures. He suggests even spirits might be involved. Watching Mary closely, he questions her directly, insinuating she is hiding something. He says her passive attitude contrasts with Alan's good intentions, leaving Mary shaken and speechless. Mary, walking alone, reflects sadly about herself. She believes she has nothing special, just some talent and healing magic, enough to be noticed. When she got the chance to join the heroes group, she accepted but feels that, as Alan said, there are many other healers like her. Her expression and thoughts reveal a deep feeling of inadequacy and emptiness. Mary recalls her earlier thoughts. She believed that if she seized the opportunity, she could become someone valuable. But now she realizes the person she wanted to support has drifted too far away. She does not want a force that hurts others and feels the weight of consequences from unresolved decisions. The mysterious figure reinforces that choices without firmness do not affect only those who make them, but bring suffering to everyone around. Mary, head lowered, declares she cannot continue with the group. The room falls silent as the other members stare at her surprised. One calls her by name, realizing her decision is already made. With a sad smile, Mary quietly says goodbye, expressing contained but resolute pain. Mary confronts Alan, demanding he explain his reaction. Alan stands up irritated, but is restrained by his companions, who ask him to calm down and listen. The eye patch warrior interrupts him firmly, ordering that for once he just listen. Mary, voice trembling, admits she cannot continue, leaving everyone silent. Mary confesses before everyone that with her abilities, she feels she would only hinder the group. She lowers her head, overwhelmed by insecurity, but soon reveals her true feelings. All this time, she tried her best because she wanted to be useful to the hero. Her voice wavers between sadness and frustration as Alan watches silently, surprised by her sincerity. With tears in her eyes, Mary firmly states that Alan is not a hero. The statement shocks everyone in the group, who react with surprise, confusion, and silence. Alan tries to respond, but is interrupted by the strength of her words. Tension takes over the room as Mary faces the truth she had long kept inside. After Mary's harsh accusation, Alan remains seated in silence, somber and with his expression hidden by shadows. With fingers intertwined and firm posture, he simply says, "Continue." His voice carries a threatening calm, making it clear he is willing to hear everything, even if it hurts. The atmosphere becomes tense, and everyone in the hall holds their breath. Mary bursts into tears and anger, recalling how Rick, someone loyal to the group, was expelled without hesitation. She realizes she should have noticed the signs then. She accuses Alan of never thinking about his actions, always blaming others when things don't go his way. Her trembling voice reveals that his attitudes caused Fitz's ruin and even Matilda's death. Her words hit everyone in the room, exposing the weight of decisions once ignored. Mary, filled with pain and anger, confronts Alan with direct and harsh words. She accuses him of ignoring everything he has been avoiding for so long, stating the group no longer expects anything from him, and that is why no one confronts him anymore. Even when interrupted by Victor, she insists, saying calling him a hero is a cruel joke. Her shouts echo through the room as Alan remains silent, with a dark and motionless gaze. Victor, filled with indignation, shouts loudly at Alan, "You have no right to call yourself a hero!" The accusation echoes through the hall, loaded with frustration and truth. Meanwhile, Alan remains seated, motionless, eyes hidden by shadows. His silence becomes heavier than any response as tension reaches its peak. Mary, out of breath and with watery eyes, demands an answer from Alan. Finally, he speaks, but instead of reflecting, he mocks. He accuses Mary of only spreading distrust and lowering the group's morale with her childish complaints. In a cold tone, he claims her attitude disrespects a hero acting under the king's orders. Mary, shocked, begins to realize the gravity of his words as Alan hides his cruelty behind a false sense of duty. With a twisted smile, Alan accuses Mary of rebellion against the kingdom, stating this makes her a traitor. He claims she deserves to be eliminated for that, and moves to attack her without hesitation. Shock takes over the room. Victor shouts for Alan to stop, but it is already too late. The death threat is clear. Alan's hero mask falls completely, revealing the true nature behind his authority. Alan, overwhelmed by rage, tries to force his authority as hero, but is immediately restrained by another group member who disarms him and points out his abuse of power. Victor holds Mary back to prevent her from acting impulsively while trying to calm the situation, but she explodes with frustration, accusing Alan of cowardice for never facing his own flaws. The atmosphere is tense, everyone on edge. The group begins to see that Alan's leadership mask no longer holds the respect he demanded. The tension is broken by the arrival of the royal envoy, who intervenes with authority. He states that Mary's words do not constitute treason against the kingdom, invalidating any justification Alan might have to attack her. The emissary acknowledges Mary's desire to leave the group and says there are no objections to that, treating the case as an internal team matter. Firmly, he orders Alan to lower his sword and declares that for now he will take custody of Mary. Finally, he issues a direct warning. If this escalates to violence, the group itself will be judged for failing to fulfill the role expected of heroes. The royal envoy imposes the final decision. No one may interfere with Mary until the current mission is completed. After that, they can do as they wish. He asks for an agreement with everyone, and Mary apologizes, seeking to end the conflict. Alan remains silent. The atmosphere calms, and the envoy tries to ease tension, laughing and saying they showed something too unpleasant. Mary bows in thanks, while the others try to move on after the confrontation. After the tension ends, the group members begin to reflect. One recognizes that dealing with great responsibilities linked to the state, misunderstandings are inevitable. Victor tries to ease the situation, acknowledging Alan's impulse to lose patience, but making clear he went too far. He calls him by name, trying to reconnect the dialogue in a more rational and controlled way. Alan changes the focus of the conversation and reminds Victor of the main mission: conquer the dungeon as a symbol of the kingdom. Ignoring what happened, he coldly declares they must eliminate anyone who tarnishes their honor. Despite Victor trying to proceed calmly, Alan shows a sinister and provocative smile, noticing that Victor is still thinking about Mary. Mary, shaken and with tears in her eyes, whispers Rick's name with affection and regret. Meanwhile, Alan continues with a sadistic smile, showing pleasure in the whole situation. Rick, on the other side, seems surprised and touched when hearing Mary's call. Rick contacts Yuri through a magical communication paper. She responds excitedly, saying everything is working perfectly. Yuri informs that the final touches have been completed on the dungeon they have been building, and that with continuous surveillance of the first two layers, everything is under control. The first dungeon layer is a labyrinth full of traps. Few monsters are positioned here since the main goal is to destabilize invaders mentally, forcing them to make mistakes. The labyrinth was carefully planned to delay enemy advancement and allow analysis of their behaviors. Depending on the situation, monsters or other obstacles may be sent through portals, and all this also serves as strategic preparation for more intense battles on the following layers. The second dungeon layer is a forest full of rocks. Although it has fewer fixed structures for traps, low visibility favors ambushes and guerrilla tactics. The entire field is designed to generate attacks in waves, confusing and wearing down invaders. Plants and monsters are strategically used to catch them off guard. The entrance to the deepest layer, to Grajshmir, is guarded by skeletons who take advantage of the terrain and natural defenses to set ambushes. So far, no one has managed to get past this part. The deepest dungeon layer is the Dragon's Nest. After surviving the enemies in the previous layers, the intruders are received by the powerful, newly synthesized fire dragon. The entire environment is filled with intense heat and flames, prepared to incinerate anyone daring to enter. The dragon's presence makes this area an almost impenetrable defense, described by Yuri as the perfect love nest for her and her master, serving as the dungeon's last line of defense. Monsters of the same level are not always effective in battle, so the master uses alchemy and his own skills to select only the most suitable for the dungeon. All chosen monsters receive golden potions, which further increase their presence and strength. Common synthesis is difficult, and gathering a small number of powerful monsters with good skills is almost impossible. For this reason, the master's strength comes from having a special ability, allowing this efficient and strategic combination. The boy observes the place with admiration, surprised that his ability found such a different use than expected. Even when asked if he was nervous, he says he is calm. Next to him, the woman shares his enthusiasm, both eager to see how the results of his work will bloom. Suddenly, a call interrupts the moment. Someone shouts looking for their father, catching their attention. The girl is frustrated at not being able to fight on the front line, exploding with anger at feeling useless. The boy, however, reminds her that her role is essential to protect the deepest point. He emphasizes that this task is the most important, as it can be decisive against the invaders. She is the key to defending the most chaotic parts of the place, and the warp is the tool for that. Cruz receives a pat on the head while being praised, feeling shy but happy with the recognition. The boy comments that everything, from the golden potion to the fire dragon, was part of the plan to highlight her. Then he jokes that if they sent her on an unprepared expedition, she would only cause confusion. As he continues talking, he suddenly remembers Yuri, who watches him surprised and silent. The boy sincerely thanks her for the guidance received so far and promises to protect the place prepared for them. The woman, moved by his words, becomes emotional and begins crying exaggeratedly, calling him master. Confused by the intense reaction, he watches without fully understanding the reason for the tears. The characters celebrate the contract made with the master, recognizing how much Yuri has evolved. One tries to calm the situation, reminding that the real challenge starts now. In the next moment, something violently strikes a creature in the forest, marking the start of a new confrontation. A group observes that the dungeon's energy is attracting wild monsters, even though they have not yet entered. They conclude that the place's power has increased considerably since high-level creatures have started leaving their lairs. Determined, they move forward, certain that by conquering the dungeon, they will finally free themselves from all that farce. The group shows impatience, wanting to finish the mission soon. One comments being tired of the gloomy expressions of his companions. Another agrees, recognizing the tension in the air. Meanwhile, in a different and empty environment, someone questions if everything went as planned, indicating there is more behind the ongoing events. Thanks to the information exchange with the Thieves Guild, a scandal involving the hero spread throughout the capital. Even if he survives, his reputation as a hero is ruined. Taking advantage of the situation, the group plans to use the dungeon incursion as a chance to take for themselves the image of what a true hero should be. The group reveals their plan to assassinate Alan Cole. With this, they intend to erase the image of the former hero once and for all. One conspirator declares that after this, their ally will become the true hero, the one they have always admired. Their ambition is clear, to redefine what it means to be a hero, shaping everything according to their own ideals. In a tense atmosphere, the two face each other firmly. One says he doesn't care who he will have to face. The other, confident, challenges without hesitation, ready to fight at any moment.
A relaxed-looking man receives the news that Alan Cole and his group have started the attack on the final dungeon. He listens calmly while lying in bed and, after processing the information, smiles confidently, challenging the hero candidates to prove their worth to him. A group is being evaluated on whether they are the true hope of the kingdom. A man mentions Tony Richards, a famous S-rank adventurer who was once considered a hero candidate. Others recognize the name, saying they've heard of him before. They also talk about Tony's two companions, a mage and a healer, who are part of his group. The group realizes the boy was a scout for Tony's team and that he was the one who infiltrated days earlier. Looking around, they notice more suspicious people nearby. Then the boy calls for Dora and Grain, leaving the girl confused about the situation. The group mentions Victor and emphasizes that he would never give up being the team leader. Suddenly, they realize the intruder this time is someone unexpected, revealed as a shadowy figure appearing before them. Alan Cole appears before them with an intense and threatening look. The boy immediately recognizes him, saying his name in shock. The girl next to him tries to confirm if she is remembering him right, surprised by the encounter. Alan and Tony arrive together with their companions, surprising the group who didn't expect this invasion. The protagonist recognizes Alan as the one who expelled him, while observing the team ahead, the hero's own group. Although he had said before he didn't care about dealing with invaders, he admits that, since they are known, this case is different. The protagonist thinks that sooner or later he would have to face Alan and the rest of the group. He suspects Mary might have leaked information since the dungeon he's in isn't even rank E. He remembers that when Mary appeared, he had already mentally prepared for this inevitable confrontation. The protagonist assures he is fine and decides to use everything he has against Alan and Victor. He reflects that he's not doing it out of resentment, but because, by destroying the place he once belonged to, he finally has the chance to follow his own ideals for the first time. The protagonist throws a direct challenge to Alan. Meanwhile, Alan's group explores the dungeon, commenting that the first floor has the typical structure of a labyrinth, but looks different from before. They discuss whether the prior reconnaissance will help them advance. Dorma is called to act and places a strange device on the ground. The protagonist watches intrigued, trying to understand what that device is, but notices it doesn't seem related to alchemy. The device activates and emits a strange energy that runs through the dungeon corridor. The protagonist watches shocked, not understanding what they did, scared by the mysterious effect of that machine. Dorma proudly explains he created the device, an item that automatically maps dungeons by detecting the same materials in different points. Despite Tony's criticism of the complicated explanation, Dorma sums up that it's a tool to generate a map of a place already visited. Although it doesn't detect traps or monsters, they highlight that just showing the shortest path already makes the device extremely valuable. From then on, Tony decides to lead the group. Tony says disarming traps isn't a problem for him, but highlights that surprise monster attacks are even more dangerous. So, he decides Victor, for his high endurance, should go first. Victor, however, says he doesn't trust him. Tony then reveals he has a special skill to deal with this situation, leaving Victor surprised and confused hearing about this skill. The protagonist realizes the automatic mapping item is a problem since it takes almost all the advantage the labyrinth offered. Yuri shows concern, but he reassures her, saying only one of the hundreds of strategies became useless. Then he decides to counterattack, planning to calculate the shortest path and send monsters to intercept the opposing group. Tony notes that the assassin on the other side has impressive agility, able to escape even monsters and traps. He deduces it was this same assassin who helped with the reconnaissance. Despite the target's carefree appearance, Tony admits he is tough to deal with and decides the first step must be to eliminate that assassin. 30 minutes after the start of the exploration, Tony's group advances without problems, finding only one trap so far. They find it strange that nothing appeared to attack them, but conclude it makes sense since they are following the shortest path. Still, Tony comments it's too quiet, which makes him suspicious. Suddenly, an ambush happens. Several monsters jump down and attack the group, catching everyone by surprise. Victor calls for Leets, worried, but his companion reassures him, ready to face the threat. Tony explains that until then the group depended a lot on the hero's overwhelming power, so he hadn't had the chance to show his skill. He activates a technique called absolute evasion, revealing his body has a skill that automatically dodges any attack, surprising the monsters as they repeatedly fail to hit him. Tony explains his skill only works if both hands are free and that there are other specific conditions to activate it. Victor worries about sending a kid ahead, but Dorma corrects him, revealing that Tony, despite his appearance, is actually the oldest in the group, surprising Victor. Alan, confused and weakened, asks who the opponent in front of him is. The other only smiles sinisterly. Then he jumps to deliver the final blow, ending the fight with a decisive attack. Alan shows his strength by killing several monsters at once with a powerful sword strike. The creatures are thrown far away, crashing violently against the wall, while he maintains a firm and confident stance on the battlefield. The protagonist watches through an orb and concludes that Tony's dodge ability really is the result of a skill. He notices Tony can automatically dodge even attacks from blind spots and thinks maybe the requirement for this skill to work is not attacking actively. He remembers that during the previous invasion, Tony had the same defensive and anticipatory behavior. The protagonist thinks about ignoring the front line and focusing on the targets behind since attacks that don't hit Tony can't be countered. But Yuri reminds him Dorma already gave the assassin a provocation potion, which makes monsters furious and focus only on whoever drinks it. This explains why attacking other targets wouldn't work at that moment. The protagonist analyzes the situation and realizes the enemy group thought of everything. Traps are easily detected, monsters can't hit the target, and they can't switch focus. Yuri suggests filling the room with traps to limit escape options, but he concludes even that wouldn't work, because without space to escape, even an evasion skill would become useless. The protagonist assesses that even filling the place with traps offers no guarantee of capturing the enemy since traps tend to be quickly disabled. Besides, he says they can't waste precious resources reserved for expanding the dungeon's deeper floors and making important potions. In the end, he concludes it would be better to have someone else trigger the traps for them. The protagonist gets confused thinking that even using someone else to trigger traps, the attacks still wouldn't hit the main target. But then, repeating the idea of making another person step on the traps for them, he has a spark and gets excited, telling Yuri this will be the strategy and deciding to go ahead with this plan immediately. The protagonist decides he only needs to make a few changes to the final room of the first floor. Meanwhile, Tony's group arrives, noticing the blocked passage and commenting, based on the map, that ahead must be the entrance to the dungeon's second floor. Tony concludes this is the final room of the first floor. Tony's group encounters a passage full of suspicious wires, clearly a trap. Victor questions if the dungeon's design was careless only in that part, but Tony orders Leitz to deactivate the trap. Leitz responds indifferently and begins dismantling it. As Leitz starts messing with the trap, a rank B armored boar appears, caught in the wires. He observes the creature for a moment, surprised it's a monster, and soon understands the trap. The animal is freed and charges violently toward him. Tony notices that, because of the provocation effect, the monster comes straight at him. He plans not to step on the trap and instead make the monster trigger it. Confident, he thinks no matter the attack, he can rely on his dodge skill. However, when he notices the magic circle activating right between him and the boar, he is caught off guard. Tony is caught by a trap that casts a weight-increasing curse. Surprised and feeling his body getting heavier and heavier, he realizes the situation is serious. Before he can react, the armored boar hits him with full force, while Dorma shouts his name desperately, ending the chapter. The armored boar activates a weight curse that covers the entire room, doubling the target's weight and nullifying their defenses. Normally, this spell is meant to give attackers an advantage to strike harder, but for Leitz, who relied solely on agility to dodge, this support becomes fatal. He is violently thrown by the boar, unable to resist the impact. The protagonist and Yuri celebrate the plan's success. He explains the weight curse is a big problem for agile assassins, but creates a perfect combination for the armored boar, which uses heavy body charges. The impact was like a cannon hitting the target directly. Yuri praises the master's foresight, who knew that even without landing the direct attack, the negative effect would be devastating. The protagonist analyzes and concludes the weight curse probably prevented Leitz's automatic dodge skill from activating, since one of the conditions for it to work is that the user stays within a strict weight limit, which requires extremely light equipment and precise adjustments. In the end, the attack hit Leitz's weak spot, neutralizing his main defense. The group examines Leitz and discovers his skeleton is completely shattered. It's a miracle he's still alive. Without patience to care for someone on the brink of death, Alan orders they leave him behind, despite a woman reminding them there's still a chance he might survive. Alan decides they will move on to the dungeon's second floor following the shortest path, using Dorma's mapping item to avoid traps. Meanwhile, the man with the eye patch offers to force the group to move immediately, but is interrupted, as he himself says this won't be necessary, implying he prefers to handle the advance differently, so the enemy doesn't get more time to alter the next floor. While the group watches, a seriously injured man begins to babble something with effort. He tries to say Tony, but barely manages to form the words. At that moment, the man with the eye patch coldly reveals he is responsible for the king's assassination attempt, making clear why he is there. 10 years earlier, at the royal castle of Arledge, Lord Albert comments in surprise that someone so dangerous was left alive. The other man replies that he doesn't care about people's past actions, but about their talents and what they can yield in the future. He emphasizes that this individual's talent is no exception, clarifying why he was spared. The hooded man states that this prisoner will have a great impact on everyone's fate. When asked his name, the prisoner, with a sinister smile, says he has no name and that they can call him whatever they want, reinforcing his mysterious and unpredictable aura. Someone provokes, asking if he really thinks he can become a hero with just pretty words. The protagonist, thoughtful, looks at the horizon and declares he wants to pursue his ideals, no matter the cost. Another comments that maybe precisely because they are pretty words, they keep everyone's hope alive. The man says he will take on all the darkness and filth of the path, allowing the other to pursue his ideals without dirtying his own hands. In return, the mysterious prisoner asks that when this darkness is no longer needed, he himself be discarded as well, accepting his dark role without hesitation. Before leaving, Alan looks at Leitz, thanks him for everything so far, and tells him to dirty his own hands from now on. Soon after, without hesitation, Alan delivers a fatal blow to Leitz, coldly ending the role of the ally who served him so well. After eliminating Leitz, the man with the eye patch apologizes for the inconvenience and suggests they move on quickly. Alan, annoyed, says he should have done that from the start. As the group prepares to move forward, the man looks back and, with a heavy gaze, silently promises Leets he will meet him again someday. The man with the eye patch, determined, thinks that now that Leets' role is over, he will do everything to earn the hero title. Meanwhile, the protagonist watches through his orb and analyzes the situation, noticing that despite the plan to wear down the group on the first floor, they arrived on the second with more energy than expected, mainly because two S-level strength adventurers appeared, something not accounted for. The protagonist decides to change plans and attack the enemy group on the second floor. He asks his ally to buy time, preventing them from advancing. She responds confidently that this will be easy and even suggests eliminating them all right there, but he just asks her not to overdo it. The scene ends the chapter, leaving tension for the next confrontation. Alan watches the place carefully, advancing through an area filled with huge trees. As he walks toward what seems to be an entrance, birds get startled and fly away, drawing his attention and putting him on alert for what might come. Alan and his group arrive at a new area of the dungeon that simulates an outdoor environment with forest and sky, even though they're inside a dungeon. Dormo watches the spatial distortion surprised, while they explain that this type of dungeon usually follows patterns, and here the theme is forest and fortress. Alan sees the structure from afar and suggests crossing straight through, but Dorma scolds him, telling him to think before acting. The group talks about how this floor is even more dangerous than a traditional labyrinth since there are no walls or artificial roads, only forest. Many novice groups end up exterminated not by monsters, but by getting lost in the natural terrain. Dorma decides this is the ideal moment to use the auto-mapping item and open the way safely. The group discovers Dorma's scanner doesn't work well in open areas, which frustrates him, calling the device useless trash. Alan then suggests natural methods to orient themselves, like observing moss that grows more on the north side, and says that to reach such a big fortress, that will be enough. Soon after, he asks Dorma for a golden potion, and the mage, somewhat nervous, promptly obeys. Alan explodes and calls Dorma an idiot for wasting time arguing, telling him just to obey. Dorma tries to retort, saying they have few members and are still at the beginning of the second floor. Meanwhile, Victor watches and reassures Yuri, saying Alan is calm for now, but acts guided by an almost animal instinct, which worries him a bit. The protagonist group evaluates the situation. They comment that there's a chance of an unexpectedly strong enemy hiding on this floor. The protagonist notices that by defeating the assassin earlier, they gained a large number of points at once. But that came at a cost. All the golden potions prepared were used to strengthen the monsters on the second floor, since the enemy group advanced faster than expected, leaving them worried about what else might appear. The group is surprised by an enemy attack. One member shouts a warning about the attack, while the hero, annoyed, comments that they're just a bunch of weaklings. At the same time, the light-haired woman orders Cruz and the others to buy time for her to synthesize more golden potions to strengthen the remaining monsters. She watches the approaching fight, interested to see what the hero is really capable of. The group advances cautiously, while the long-haired man warns not to let their guard down. He explains that the outdoor environments created inside the dungeon serve to strengthen the monsters, as the fertile mana of the place increases their powers. Meanwhile, the hero blocks the attack of a creature that jumps on him, ready for combat. The three warriors, Alan, Victor, and Tony, form a reversed formation to protect the support group. Victor is responsible for the rear, the most vulnerable point. Ready for combat, they prepare to hold off any threat coming toward the group. Doma spreads reinforcement potions, while Iron releases a smoke that regenerates allies and blinds enemies. Christopher takes advantage of openings, casting magic to strike at the right spots, maintaining the group's coordinated offense. Cruz notices that the enemy group is quickly adapting to a long battle. They plan to attack at the peak of the first wave to force chaos and break the formation before the second wave. Meanwhile, Victor is surprised by the number and endurance of the monsters, which, despite being common, keep appearing nonstop. Alan senses something strange and shouts for Victor to dodge, but it's too late. Victor looks scared and is hit by a violent attack that catches him off guard, revealing the imminent danger the group faces. The villain watches the group with a provocative smile, while Victor lies fallen and Alan protects him. She mocks them, calling Alan rude, and saying she wants to see what kind of parents would raise someone like him. Alan responds with disdain, unfazed by the provocations. Alan and Victor become alert as they sense the threatening presence of the woman before them. Even though she appears harmless, Alan feels she's much more dangerous than any monster they've faced so far. Victor warns not to be fooled by appearances, and Alan confirms he had sensed that dark aura since they entered the second floor, finally identifying its origin. Victor watches as the irritated, mysterious woman points at the group and declares how annoying they are. In a quick, smiling move, she advances toward Victor, who reacts surprised, with no time to escape the powerful attack that strikes him hard. The monsters advance while Victor is gravely injured and spits blood, leaving the group in shock. Doma screams furiously. The enemy takes command, ordering the monsters to eliminate those in the rear while she holds the front line, determined to leave the cowardly Doma behind. Victor stands firm and unleashes a powerful magical attack that sweeps the monsters before him, creating a devastating explosion that leaves the battlefield in ruins, while the woman watches coldly, assessing the situation. The explosion destroys the field, but the woman just smiles, impressed by Victor's speed. She comments that it's the first time someone has managed to scratch her skin, while Victor, panting and irritated, prepares to continue fighting alongside companions who shout to reinforce the rear guard. Victor charges with a fierce scream, saying he will be the one to take down the enemy. With his sword raised, he moves to attack, aiming directly at the woman, while Alan watches his comrades' determined move. Victor rushes forward forcefully, charging straight at the mysterious woman and shouting with determination. As he approaches, the ground explodes with small projectiles that begin to surround and target him, but he continues without hesitation, focused only on his target. Victor tries to attack, but the woman delivers a powerful kick to his face, smiling with amusement and saying he's entertaining her more than she expected. The blow hits him squarely, throwing his head back as he screams in pain. Cruz watches, realizing the woman is just playing with Alan. He's surprised to notice that, although he thought she could only match him, she clearly controls the fight and is dominating him effortlessly. Alan realizes how truly dangerous the woman is, admitting to himself that the level gap is far beyond what he thought. Meanwhile, she coldly taunts him, saying all this is just child's play, mocking his strength and asking if that's all he has to show. Alan desperately tries to activate his ability while receiving a violent blow from the woman, who already shows boredom and tells him to just die already. He mentally insists for his ability to work, but nothing happens, which intrigues her since she also expected a reaction that doesn't come. Outside, Cruz watches, finding it strange since Alan should already be pressured enough to activate his power. Alan is shocked, realizing he might be finished, asking himself if that was really all there was. Cruz also watches surprised, unable to understand how the fight ended so easily, thinking it was already over. Then, the woman moves to finish Alan, who falls to the ground, indicating he was hit. Tony appears to defend Alan, blocking the enemy's attack and saying he already has control of the rear guard. Alan, surprised and irritated, questions what happened to the rear support, but Tony responds confidently. Meanwhile, a dark and imposing figure appears on the field, raising the tension of the confrontation even more. Alan watches seriously as Doma's huge runic golem rises from the ground, activated by magical symbols engraved in the soil. Doma appears, panting but smiling, apologizing for the delay, and explaining he prepared everything after noticing the strength difference between them and the enemy. Alan just growls a tch, irritated by the situation but aware of the advantage the golem can bring. The woman watches in shock as the huge runic golem rises before her. The expression on her face shows surprise and confusion as she tries to understand what that colossal creature is, which suddenly appeared, completely changing the course of the fight. The second floor's ground is shown filled with magical energy accumulated by the monsters, which makes the runic golem even stronger thanks to the runes carved directly on it. Meanwhile, the group watches surprised. The woman with glasses admits with a confident smile that the alchemist responsible is more skilled than she thought. The opponent analyzes the situation with disdain, concluding the golem is just a simple puppet being controlled. Cruz confidently advances to show his true power, shouting that size doesn't matter against strength. However, an ally tries to warn him not to attack. Meanwhile, the golem immediately reacts, preparing a powerful counterattack that surprises everyone. A huge monster appears next to the girl, protecting her and getting ready to fight the approaching golem. She watches calmly, confident, as the giant positions itself as her shield and the confrontation intensifies. The monster beside the girl starts reacting strangely, emitting sounds and lights, which surprises everyone. The black-haired boy realizes it wasn't just a bluff and is alarmed by the situation. The girl watches the monster confused, not understanding what is happening. The boy realizes shocked that the golem was just a distraction. The real purpose was in the weakening runes engraved on it. By destroying the golem, they activated a trap that applies a powerful debuff to whoever defeated it. Seeing the danger, he shouts for Cruz to retreat immediately, but she reacts surprised and irritated. The group decides to retreat to avoid further damage, planning to solve everything at the fortress. They fear Cruz will suffer from the debuff effect if they advance recklessly. Meanwhile, the woman with the monster admits he couldn't enter the fortress because of his size. Before leaving, she warns that next time will be the end for them, leaving the hero with a tense look. The woman makes a final threat, telling them to pray and wait for the worst. The group watches silently as she and the monsters retreat. Relieved, they notice the monsters are pulling back. Victor comments surprised that somehow they managed to survive that situation. Alan grabs the mage's collar and scolds her, telling her not to think too highly of herself since ever since they entered the dungeon, she's been acting on her own, ignoring his orders. The mage tries to justify herself, but he yells that all she needs to do is follow his damn orders. Meanwhile, another companion watches and comments that thanks to that she managed to stay alive, although Alan says she still had strength left because of the golden potion. Alan steps back and says he never counted on Doma's help from the start. Still, Victor praises Doma for his work, trying to cheer him up and telling him not to mind it, explaining that Alan is just irritated for having taken a beating for the first time in a long while. Victor reprimands Doma, saying it's still a problem to act without orders, even if he understands the reason. Shortly after, Doma calls Victor hesitantly and reveals that while making the golem, he found something strange near the monster's corpses. Victor shows a vial asking if they recognize the item, revealing what Doma found. Meanwhile, Cruz, injured and frustrated for not having defeated even one enemy, is comforted by her allies, who say the main objective was achieved and chasing them further would be reckless. Based on this page, Cruz and her group evaluate that they have enough golden potions to deal with the heroes before they reach the third floor. They comment that they know Alan and Victor well, highlight that the enemy mage is versatile, capable of attacking and defending, and that the healer uses smoke with a regenerative effect, something that works both to heal and obscure vision, which complicates things for them. On this page, they talk about Doma, saying he is much more unpredictable than they expected, always appearing with hidden tricks. Cruz notes that the title of better alchemist than them was not just talk, but she still feels there is something strange about him, as if there's something more she can't quite understand. Meanwhile, Yuri gets all shy and downplays herself, saying that compared to the master's genius, her level is nothing. On this page, the group begins to put the pieces together about Doma. They realize he uses inventions that go beyond common alchemy and that they probably weren't ordered by Alan, indicating his presence might have another purpose. They remember Alan chose Doma not only for his alchemist skills, but for his ability to follow exactly what he demanded. They also highlight that since they entered the dungeon, only Alan took the golden potion, which makes them think that the weak point of that group might be precisely that. To top it off, they suspect there is a human on the monster's side with advanced alchemy knowledge. On this page, we see the group discussing in secret. Victor tells them not to say anything to Alan for now and promises to talk to the right person at the right time. They reflect on how only a few alchemists can create the golden potion, something so rare even they know it. Then Victor, thoughtful and suspicious, looks at Rick and wonders, could it be you? This suggests he suspects Rick might be behind the humans' involvement with the monsters or something even bigger. At this part, the group assesses the losses and damage after the confrontation. They comment that up to that point, they lost a companion and that the hero also came out quite injured. For them, it was a hard blow. Observing the fallen enemy, they say it was probably a direct ancestor, something rare to see. Then, they question why someone risked so much to save another during the battle, showing concern and even reprimanding that impulsive attitude. In this passage, the group talks about honor and the true meaning of being a hero. One character says that if the hero had fallen there, it would have stained his title, and that a true hero would never stoop to take advantage of a fallen opponent like a vulture. He declares that only by defeating the hero with their own hands can someone become the true hero. Another character, realizing it's useless to argue, simply accepts it. Meanwhile, Doma assures he installed an automatic system in the golem to intercept any abnormality, asking his companion to focus only on recovering, which he accepts with a simple yeah. Victor and Doma conclude that few alchemists can create golden potions. Looking at Rick suspiciously, it is revealed that Rick is self-taught and never part of the alchemist society, but was part of the hero's former group. Doma then despises him, coldly stating he's not worthy of being in Alan's group. Rick accepts the potion delivered by Doma, who explains it's a special version of the golden potion made to enhance existing abilities in whoever consumes it. Rick is confused and suspicious, not fully understanding what Doma means by that, while the alchemist details that the effect varies for each person, depending on individual potential. Doma looks at the potion, irritated that Rick tampered with the legendary golden potion's formula without being a certified alchemist. Still, she admits Rick has some skill since he was part of the heroes group. However, upon closer inspection, she notices something strange about that potion, becoming surprised and not understanding exactly what she's looking at. Rick watches with a slight smile as Doma is shocked analyzing the potion. She realizes it's something totally different, like it was made by an amateur copying what he saw, working without understanding why. Rick, however, reveals he recreated the golden potion from scratch, with different ingredients, something that took geniuses years of research to perfect, making clear the size of the achievement. Doma, incredulous, stares at the laboratory and tries to convince herself she could also make something like that, since for her, Rick is just an amateur. But the truth gnaws at her. Someone who treats alchemy only as a hobby shouldn't be able to surpass alchemists who dedicate their whole lives to the art. This shakes her deeply. Rick remembers the past, in a crowded hall, when he was met with mockery by Fitz and instructed about the group's basic rules: never anger Alan under any circumstance. The scene shows the heavy influence the hero has over everyone there, including the strongest and most confident. Matilda introduces herself as the mage and Mary as the healer, welcoming the new member, while Fitz explains the group changes members often and never has more than 8 people. The mood reveals the team is unstable, and Rick understands he replaced someone who was discarded as soon as he arrived. The group reveals that everyone there is there for selfish reasons like fame, fortune, or debts, making clear they are disposable pieces for the hero, who swaps them without hesitation. The mood among them is one of provocation and distrust, although they acknowledge they were chosen for their skills. She thinks the group is just a bunch of lazy and unambitious people, but admits to herself that no matter how rotten it is, it's still the hero's party, and so she will use whatever she can, even if she has to swallow some pride. 2 months later, the alchemist asks for more budget resources to set up a stable potion production line, saying this would help in expeditions. The hero, irritated, pressures her about her role in the group, questioning if she is really doing the necessary work. The hero criticizes the alchemist, saying she can't even handle well the little she already does, and ends up being just dead weight. He orders her to return to her room and focus on what she should be doing. Despite having good resources and a favorable research environment, the alchemist admits her actions remain very limited. The alchemist becomes frustrated after another failure in her experiments, thinking about how much longer she can endure chasing empty achievements. She questions if continuing to work in the heroes group, participating in dungeon expeditions, will really bring any value to her future. A man approaches Doma and surprises her by saying he knows her name, not only because she's part of the heroes group, but because of the thesis she published on hybrid development between alchemy and magic, a work despised by the conservative academic elite and never given a chance for recognition. This visibly shakes and moves Doma emotionally. A man praises Doma's research and says that to them, her work is truly fascinating. He proposes that, together with them, she could have support to continue her studies. Doma listens, but soon asks directly what they want in return, showing distrust despite interest. The chapter ends at this point.
1 hour has passed since the dungeon exploration began. On the first floor, the assassin Letzi was killed. In the forest, on the first level, there was a battle between Alan's group and the horde led by Cruz. They managed to repel the attack with the help of the rune golem created by the alchemist Doma. The group advanced with the golem leading the front. The golem helped with guard and surveillance, despite consuming fuel poorly. The floor's soil was rich in mana, making its creation easier. Doma believes his invention will change the adventurer's world. Alan warns not to get distracted by thoughts of profit, even though getting the dungeon's patent could bring great fortune. The group remembers they are still inside the dungeon and that the assassin was the first to die due to recklessness. One of them comments that the group members seem innocent and lucky. The researcher thinks that, to return to the academic field, she will need a lot of money for research and concrete results. The automatic map and rune golem were made possible thanks to Tony and his group's support. If he proves these tools' usefulness during exploration, it will benefit everyone. The man plans to grant Alan the title of hero. The group's goal is to kill Alan. The woman who wants to return to academia says that, by doing so, she will become the true heroine, and asks for the others' cooperation. Even if she had not accepted the deal, the plan would be carried out anyway. Later, they would conquer the dungeon where Alan fell midway and claim the hero's title. The only option left for her is to act alone. The original plan for the fortress was infiltration. The enemy group is surprised to see the golem advancing directly in front, something they did not expect due to its huge size. They realize this is practically a siege on the fortress, forcing a direct battle. Skeleton archer units shoot arrows from the walls. The golem is protecting the group for now, but is gradually taking damage. They have no way to counterattack from a distance, and the weakening rune only works in direct contact. Alan orders them to make the golem break the fortress gate, no matter how. Meanwhile, the elf watches the situation smiling, saying it's nothing, and admits she was also caught off guard by the events. The elf comments that Alan seems to get excited when things get tough, which surprises her because he hadn't noticed. He admits that somehow it makes him happy, and concludes that alchemy is exactly about turning unexpected results into new discoveries, and that's why she also feels that way. Alan watches with a challenging smile, hoping the golem will exceed his expectations. Soon after, the golem forcefully breaks down the fortress gate, opening the way. Alan commands the attack, and the group advances running right behind the golem, which keeps breaking the defenses. However, something huge and dark starts moving, drawing their attention and causing surprise. A wyvern appears attacking the group, putting everyone at a disadvantage for being exposed in the open field. Alan orders the others to move forward to the fortress, while he stays back to hold the creature and cover them. The wyvern attacks fiercely, surprising Victor and destroying part of the defense. Alan and the researcher are shocked to see the scene, shouting Victor's name in the chaos. Alan shows he's shaken seeing Victor wounded, but quickly reacts, ordering everyone to stop complaining and move forward fast. The researcher hesitates, but he insists, saying he would only change his mind if they wanted to die there for being weak. Doma agrees that Alan is right. Since the escape route was cut off and the fortress is full of monsters, moving forward is the most sensible choice. The researcher offers a night vision potion because it's dark, but Alan refuses, saying he doesn't need it. The rival group states there is no one left on Alan's side and that they will settle everything now. Alan and his allies realize the enemies are fully ready for the fight, even after he lost his partner. Alan then orders to advance, firm in his determination. The group worries about Victor and fears they might be running out of time, because if they lose this floor, only the third level remains, where the fire dragon waits. The master calms Yuri, saying that rebuilding the dungeon was part of the plan for such situations, showing he was prepared for this kind of setback. They calculate that the enemy group has 5 strong adventurers left, and that, even with a fire dragon, they could only hold them for 5 minutes. The master thinks that even sending crews, they still don't know what Doma might be plotting. He considers that if he underestimates Doma as just an alchemist, everything he has built so far could be destroyed, leaving him torn about which decision to make. The protagonist is hit violently while remembering his bonds with Yuri and the others, and all the alchemical dungeon they built together. He screams in his mind, calling his father an idiot, feeling the pain of seeing everything he achieved about to collapse. Cruz confronts the master, saying he only had to give the order to attack together. She reminds him they were all there when the enemy invaded, and that he said they would give their all. Now she questions if that didn't mean facing danger together, with everyone sharing the same determination, not just his idea of what giving all meant. The elf says Yuri was practically dead before he saved her, and that, as Cruz said, that is the truth. She says she feels no regret for offering her life, which he saved, and asks him not to hesitate and to make the decision soon. The protagonist hears this shocked and thoughtful. The elf extends her hand and reminds the protagonist that he is the master of that dungeon. He looks at her and his allies, thinking, and confirms in his mind that yes, it's right. He is responsible for everything there. He thinks unpredictable situations shouldn't be feared, as alchemy has always been like that. Many tries and failures until finding the truth. He realizes nothing changed and decides to seize the moment. With a confident smile, he thanks Yuri and Cruz for being by his side. He acknowledges this is a crucial moment and a big risk, but faces it with a determined smile. Looking at his allies, he decides to move forward and confidently declares, "Let's start the experiment." Alan's group advances down a corridor full of monster corpses. Doma checks the map and warns that ahead seems to be the main hall, asking them to be careful not to get surrounded. Alan just follows silently, focused. Alan reaches a large courtyard where the enemy awaits. He smiles confidently and says, "This seems to be where the final confrontation will be decided." The adversaries' faces show determination, indicating the outcome of that battle is about to happen. Under an eclipse, Alan watches seriously as an enemy approaches, laughing provocatively. He asks what happened to the small army Alan had in the forest, mocking him not to get too excited yet, suggesting the fight has just begun. Alan watches as the enemy summons a high orc and a boss troll, saying she can't waste strength and resources on them. She prepares these monsters as the battlefront, emerging from the shadows to face Alan's group. The enemy says she needs to save strength for other invaders, provoking Alan, who gets angry and asks if she really thinks there will be a next time. She replies that he should worry more about himself and mocks him, hoping the little one there saves him again, making Alan grind his teeth in anger. Alan charges furiously, shouting not to mess with him. He delivers a powerful strike against the enemy, while his allies watch tensely and call for him. Surprised by his burst of rage and strength, the narrator recalls that in the forest, it was clear how huge the power gap between Alan and Cruz was, but that even so, Alan's strength could not be ignored. He thinks that if they face Alan head-on, he could disrupt the group's movements. So he decides to make the two monsters in the front line hold Alan while containing him. While the monsters hold Alan in the front line, Cruz advances to attack the rear, which is considered the right move. Doma calls for Iron, who quickly understands and confirms with a "got it," ready to act in coordination with the plan. Cruz complains seeing a smoke curtain arise, saying that wouldn't work on her. But soon Doma calmly activates his magic, saying "explosion," and the place is taken by a violent flash, surprising Cruz mid-attack. The magic explosion creates a huge crater and raises a cloud of debris. Meanwhile, Aaron locates Cruz's movement coming from 1 o'clock and confirms the position, preparing to intercept. Alan blocks the troll's attack, while Aaron is hit and thinks she needs to deal with the little one first, referring to Cruz. At the same time, Cruz prepares to launch a new strike, showing concentration and coldness. Cruz is surprised to see Alan matching her speed, even without any reinforcement. Meanwhile, it's explained that Aaron is a smoke magic specialist, able to spread flammable dust and sense movements by particles in the air. And Tony can read the enemy's next move just by the slightest change in the smoke. Inside the dungeon, this gives them a huge advantage. Unlike the forest, Tony casts a magic missile spell while Alan shouts, and his body seems to dissolve into mist, confusing the opponents. Watching closely, Tony realizes Alan used the moment the explosion smoke cleared to turn into mist and escape, surprising them. Alan observes and thinks this is the real coordination of a group full of rank S adventurers who never trust only one strategy and cover each other's weaknesses. They plan to switch who holds Alan because they see Cruz isn't the best to handle such a well-coordinated enemy. Tony also says they learned a lot from the last fight, showing they are ready to adapt their tactics. Tony and the others guarantee that as long as Alan keeps the enemy busy in melee combat, they can overwhelm the target by numbers. That way, no one can interfere with Alan's fight. Aaron thinks that even if Doma has some trump card, he wouldn't use anything that risks allies. Seeing this, the vampire decides to go after Alan herself, and Aaron concludes that this is actually the smartest choice. This passage shows Tony, right at the perfect moment, preparing his attack. He gets into position, draws his weapon, and begins channeling his power, ready to launch a decisive strike against the advancing enemies. The monsters seem to freeze or suffer an unexpected effect, leaving the protagonist confused and saying only, "Eh?" Soon after, we see Aaron, Chris, and another ally preparing to act confidently, while the girl calls them excitedly, showing they are ready to turn the tide. We see the group cast a spell called Perfect Prison, forming a gigantic magical circle that completely surrounds the area. The enemies look around confused, not understanding what it means. Tony watches seriously, while Alan asks irritably, "What the hell is that supposed to be?" Doma calls Tony, showing they are about to reveal the true purpose of the magical trap. Tony's group finishes casting the Perfect Prison spell. Doma and Aaron celebrate the spell's success, with Aaron happily exclaiming, "We did it, Tony-san." Tony confirms with a "yeah," satisfied with the well-executed plan. The group carries out the plan as agreed. Tony wishes good luck and follows the agreement with Aaron. Soon after, the monster charges violently, catching everyone by surprise. Aaron laughs confidently while watching Alan resist and says, "Fighting is useless," making clear they believe they have already won. Tony explains it's not just simple magic. The spell uses the same principle as walls or alloys, refining the magical power of two people to create a much stronger barrier. They show confidence, stating they will prove to the academic society the strength of the technique, while Alan becomes furious at the trap. Alan looks at the magical barrier with disdain and advances confidently, saying they underestimated his strength by thinking two could contain him. He releases his power with a provocative smile, while his enemies watch closely. The alchemist maintains precise control of the magical barrier, which regenerates itself even when damaged. He proudly calls it a perfect prison, while Alan reacts impatiently, criticizing their long speeches. The alchemist reveals the real goal of the magical prison is to capture Alan alive, keeping his life energy constant. Alan gets irritated, asking what he wants, but the other calmly explains that all the spell's effects serve to guarantee the success of this purpose. The woman explains that inside that magical prison, none of them will be able to hurt the other, no matter how much they try. To prove it, she attacks Alan directly, who is surprised not to take damage, confirming the spell truly prevents any injury between them. While Tony advances to clear the main dungeon, the woman states that Alan and the other warrior must remain there. She reveals that after this, Tony intends to challenge the dungeon master in a direct duel, wanting to defeat him alone to honor the hero title, without anyone's help. Alan reacts shocked upon hearing this. The master analyzes the situation and concludes that if Doma's explanation is correct, the perfect prison can be broken by interrupting the magical energy flow shared by the three casters. Although hesitant for a moment, he decides they must act quickly and orders the dungeon monsters to be brought inside the hall, preparing to execute the plan. The master is surprised to realize the troll and orc Tony faced were defeated too quickly, suspecting he is hiding some trump card. Tony, on the other hand, comments with a smile that he didn't think they'd let him go alone, and the elf responds, half amused, saying that sounds like trust, but implying it's not exactly so. The group reveals they allowed Tony to advance alone because he has skills worthy of trust, but also because they want to observe what he will do. Meanwhile, they order to keep Tony occupied to buy time and try to rescue Cruz. It becomes clear that the entire dungeon assault was meticulously planned since the moment Albert approached them. They discuss how there are abilities in this world that, under certain conditions, unleash unbelievable power. While Alan reacts with disdain, the other explains that, for example, there is an instant death ability that can only be used during the new moon night, exactly the moment they are in. Tony then prepares to activate this lethal technique. They are shocked to realize the activated ability is so deadly that even a scratch means immediate death, making normal fighting impossible. The plan to use a potion that only works when receiving damage becomes useless, and their whole risky strategy fails. Now the group is desperate, not knowing what to do in this scenario. They notice through magical observation that the opponent, without his special ability active, has brute strength equivalent to an S-rank adventurer like Tony. But since the other is in poor shape and the enemy's ability is working perfectly, this puts him at a disadvantage. Then the ally calls the young man to pay attention, making clear the situation is serious. They decide to make a temporary truce. The young man asks for help to destroy the barrier, promising to settle their dispute later. The woman agrees with a confident smile, but the alchemist warns it's useless because even joining forces, the wall will regenerate itself unless they face whoever is outside controlling everything. Victor suddenly appears, drawing everyone's attention and surprising Alan, who shouts his name. Seeing the chaos, Victor comments coldly that things got really complicated again, showing he's ready to get involved and possibly turn the tide. Victor charges with full force, surprising Alan, who shouts his name. The impact is so violent it destroys everything around, making clear the overwhelming power of the strike. Meanwhile, elsewhere, someone watches the destruction and coldly comments that Rick was eliminated like trash, worthless. Alan has seemed distracted lately, which draws the group's attention. They comment that the next day they will explore a new cave. There's a hypothesis that replacing a team member might be the cause of this change in Alan's behavior. One of the companions then says coldly that Alan is done, both as a group member and as a martial artist. Then they offer him a suspicious potion, saying it speeds circulation and reduces fatigue. But Alan is suspicious, sensing the strange vibe. Alan is surprised to see Victor make such a sudden decision. While watching his companion leave, Alan thinks about what's happening, wondering the reason behind it all. He feels the weight of Rick's loss and the fear that settled in the group. Unable to continue in such a shaken group, Alan confesses to Victor that he can no longer go on by their side. Alan is approached by Cruz in a tavern. Cruz, excited, says he was introduced by an old acquaintance and celebrates the fact the group is finally complete, ready to start real adventures. While toasting, Alan observes and responds with a simple, silently processing the situation and thinking about what it means. Alan is informed by an officer that the Senate is considering revoking his hero title, but may ignore it if he clears some dungeons as proof of his strength. Even so, the officer asks Alan not to worry, as he himself would carry the hero name's weight if needed. Alan's companions swear to support him, and he feels so impacted by the situation. It's like one of those moments when life flashes before your eyes. A mysterious man tells Alan he is not the only one he saw potential in as a hero, but Alan has a special chance. The old man advises him to value the people he meets along the way. After the man leaves, Alan wonders who that guy was, reflecting on what he heard and ironically thinking how someone as bad as him being called a hero is the biggest joke he's ever heard. He looks confused and angry. Alan is sitting, hearing someone say directly that he doesn't deserve to call himself a hero. After a heavy silence, the person walks away and adds that they believe Alan could still become a true hero. This makes clear that despite the harsh judgment, there is hope or confidence in Alan's potential to change. Victor, injured and gasping, gets up after breaking through the wall, laughing tiredly. He realizes it's not the time to dream peacefully and admits to himself that Alan is a lost cause without him around, showing his determination to keep helping despite everything. Victor, still smiling despite the risk, looks at the magical field around and calls Alan, saying he kind of expected this. He tries to break the tension by reminding that something similar had happened before, surprising and worrying his companions. Victor, even feeling pain and complaining about his head, casually recalls an old mess caused by Alan's way, which irritated other adventurers and ended with them surrounded by bandits. Alan, annoyed, tells him to stop talking nonsense and help kill those guys soon. The other young man says the one talking nonsense is actually Alan himself, but trusts Rick could handle something like that easily. Victor looks for Rick without knowing where he went, imagining that if he had the golden potion, he could even break that barrier. While Alan seems to have confused memories, the other man provokes him, telling him to stop before exposing his soul even more. Then he prepares to attack, shouting he will finish Alan completely and cleanly, taking advantage that Alan's body resistance is only from the neck down. Victor suddenly appears and attacks, with full force, surprising everyone. The impact is so big that even the onlookers are stunned, not understanding what happened at the moment of the strike. Victor manages to interrupt the magic for a moment by attacking, but the magical wall hasn't fallen completely because the mana flow was not cut. Alan realizes there's no time to lose and orders Victor to go after Tony, who went alone to face the dungeon master. Rick asks Alan not to conquer the dungeon and trusts the group will handle it. He stares into the void and, even without knowing where Victor is hiding, asks him to take care of Alan, believing Victor can fix the situation. Rick confirms he understood the request and prepares to act. He calls Cruz and Yuli, who are surprised, and says he will share the plan now, making clear that everyone will have an important role in the strategy. Rick thinks about the role of being the group's shield, always being on the front line, absorbing damage first. While protecting his allies, he notes this allows analyzing the enemy's attack type and thinking of countermeasures, creating every extra second needed for the group to react. He understands only someone so close to death could have that perspective. That's the kind of role he fulfills. Rick reflects on how he always makes sure to understand well the power he has, including how much strength is needed to kill someone and the guilt that comes afterward. He recognizes that this ability to imagine others' pain is what sets him apart. But he notes there are people in this world who simply have no brakes, who don't hold back, something totally different from someone just holding a knife. Rick observes Alan's overwhelming power, something beyond right or wrong, and that surpasses fear and reason. Faced with that, ordinary people only have two paths: to be crushed and left aside, or to be drawn and follow after. Rick reveals he chose the second option, to be attracted by that power and follow it. Cruz confirms she still has the necessary item, and Rick says that's the only way. The elf, surprised, asks if they're serious. Alan complains they're still talking and gets irritated by the hurry, asking why they don't just get help from the old wizard already. Meanwhile, the group organizes to execute the plan. Alan provokes Cruz, saying her father is a pervert for making a monster call him Dad, while she irritably denies he's a pervert. Alan keeps mocking, saying a dungeon master should have full control and not fall for such simple tricks, calling her Dear Dad unimpressive. Cruz clearly gets annoyed by the provocations. Cruz gets angry hearing Alan insult her father and reacts furiously, while Aaron comments that in that place, where no one can die, it's easy to let guard down. Christopher, injured, assures he's fine because Aaron's healing magic is excellent and says they still have plenty of time. They talk about Victor, who went ahead alone. Christopher mocks, saying Victor is just a wooden puppet good for getting hit and nothing more, with no chance against the deadly attack that may come. Victor walks through the dungeon corridors, lost and worried for not having memorized the map. He remembers his role is to stop Tony, but he's tired and confused, feeling things have dragged on too long. While thinking about Mary, he is called by a dark voice inviting him to come closer. Rick appears before Victor, smiling and recalling the times he offered to guide him on adventures. Victor watches surprised as Rick reveals he brought potions so they could fight the enemy together. Rick then offers the potion to Victor, saying if he drinks it, he'll be fine. Victor holds Rick, asking anxiously if he is really the true Rick. Rick smiles and answers naturally, saying when the fight started, he panicked and hid as usual. Meanwhile, an elf watches worriedly, thinking the situation is too dangerous and wondering if Victor will be okay. Rick says firmly that this is something only he can do. Although the master smiles and says there's no need to worry, Rick insists it's not just because of that. For him, it's something he needs to do with his own hands. What makes the plan possible is the trust Victor has in him, as Victor cares more about the present than the past. Rick asks if Victor's okay, and Victor, coughing, complains about the taste of the potion he had to drink. Asking that next time Rick think a little more about the poor guy who has to swallow it. Still, he says he trusts Rick's homemade potions. Rick laughs, embarrassed, and apologizes, explaining he's been so immersed in research, he hadn't had time to think about it. Rick and Victor continue advancing down the corridor, while the elf asks the master to be careful. Using a type of communication leaf, they manage to see a map showing their position and the enemies, indicating they are almost at the crucial point. Rick encourages Victor, saying there's not much left, and Victor answers with a "okay," ready to move forward. Rick walks ahead, reflecting that even following Alan's orders, he feels he's not meeting Alan's expectations. He stops and, looking at Victor, admits he feels like he did something wrong to him, showing the weight he carries because of the situation. Victor watches Rick silently, showing he understands his friend's sincerity. Rick looks down and answers with a shy, "Yeah," while Victor says he doesn't expect forgiveness or anything like that. He explains it's not even an apology. He just felt he needed to say it at that moment. They end up in a tavern with Victor raising his mug and Rick surprised, realizing the sincerity and weight of his friend's feelings. Rick and Victor stop in front of a large door. Yuli watches confidently and says, "Well then." Rick smiles excitedly and tells Victor to go ahead. When he steps forward, the door opens, revealing someone on the other side who begins saying, "You are," starting the next encounter. Victor advances confidently through the gate, followed by Rick. He states that in the end, he is their shield, taking on his role without hesitation. Alan watches ahead, while the chapter ends, showing Victor facing his next opponent, ready to protect his companions. Rick confirms with Yuli the dungeon rules. Monsters created there disappear upon death, regardless of the dungeon master's will. Defeated adventurers, however, can be digested at the master's choice. Yuli confirms this, leaving Rick satisfied that everything is clear. Victor confirms that understanding how DP works, being generated by the life force left in bodies, is enough for him. Meanwhile, Alan watches and comments surprised that Victor still hasn't fallen, reflecting that even a rotten apple like him seems not to get in a hero's way. Victor faces his opponent, saying he understands his motivations, but holds no personal grudges. He will only stop him because it's the easiest way to win. The adversary states that his ideals aren't so cheap as to be destroyed by a mere pawn who just follows orders and challenges Victor to try. Victor advances to face Tony, who prepares his deadly strike, saying at least he wants to end him without pain. Rick watches, startled, recognizing that Tony is about to use his instant death ability. Rick explains that Tony's ability is nearly unbeatable inside a dungeon, easily eliminating even powerful monsters like the troll, the orc, and the behemoth. But he also points out that even instant death abilities have weaknesses, highlighting something essential in their plan. Rick explains that the Lich has undead attributes, and talks about how, while weak skeletons and zombies are common, creatures like zombie dragons don't appear naturally. That's because undead only appear in dungeons when deliberately created by magic, showing the limitation of this threat. Rick coldly explains that the Lich doesn't need bodies to resurrect, since he can simply make new undead using enemies that entered the dungeon as raw material. This surprises and frightens the others, revealing how calculating and prepared he is to use any resource to his advantage. Rick watches, surprised and tense, as the mysterious enemy appears before him and Victor, wearing a cloak that covers his face. The mood grows heavy and Rick shows concern, already foreseeing something dangerous is about to happen. Rick watches, shocked, as Victor is enveloped by dark energy cast by the Lich, who recites an evil spell. Victor's body trembles, and his eyes widen, but soon he regains consciousness, breathing heavily to Rick's relief. Filled with rage, Victor charges, yelling at Tony, and strikes him hard, leaving Tony surprised. Tony is shocked to realize his ability didn't activate with Victor's attack, irritably concluding it was only a scratch. His expression shows frustration and doubt upon realizing his instant death skill failed. Victor stares firmly at Tony and shouts that if he thinks the hero's shield would fall so easily, he is very mistaken. Tony watches, confused and shaken, not understanding what is happening, while Victor stands firm, showing he won't be defeated by something so simple. Victor, shirtless and battered, calmly says he has always been ready to die if it meant protecting his companions. Mary becomes distressed, begging him to at least care more about himself, while Rick watches seriously. Victor, with a calm look, says he has no talent like Alan, only always had his own body to offer. Even so, he never saw that as weakness. For him, what matters is the view he sees through his friend's eyes. That has value to him too. Then he adds that if it's for that vision, giving his own life won't be sad or painful, and he is willing to do it without regret. Victor, fallen and wounded, wonders if that was good enough. He thinks that was the only way to give his all, because it doesn't matter if that vision belongs to him or Alan. What matters is having given his best. Meanwhile, Alan watches and tells Yuri that he will defeat him and become the strongest dungeon master ever. Yuri, with an intense and determined expression, shouts that he also has something precious, the courage to give up everything just to reach the vision he wants to see. While saying this, we see a brief glimpse of memories, or of whom he wants to protect, highlighting the strength of his desire. The scene shows Yuri talking with an old sage on a balcony. With a serious look, Yuri asks why he recommended Alan as a hero, clearly intrigued and wanting to understand why someone like Alan was chosen for such an important role. The old man observes silently, pondering the question. The old man calmly explains to Yuri that alchemists don't judge things in terms of good or evil. He says that Alan, even though he has fallen into disgrace now, possesses absolute strength and almost destructive self-confidence, traits that belong only to those who walk the path of domination. The old man confesses he only guided Alan to a place where he could unleash all his talent. Yuri, moved, admits she understands, recognizing she saw Alan's power with her own eyes. Finally, the old man holds something in his palm, indicating he is about to reveal or give something important. The boy watches surprised as he realizes someone's flame has not yet gone out. The confident girl hands him a potion and orders him to drink, saying it was prepared by her father especially for that situation. Though hesitant, the boy receives the potion silently, while she taunts him, questioning what he is so afraid of. The boy is stunned to see the potion is golden, and irritably asks how that could help him at that moment, showing frustration that monsters have something made for adventurers. The girl reacts mockingly, calls him a small head, and says it's obvious why they are using it, while he explodes in indignation, gripping the potion tightly. The girl loses patience and tells the boy to shut up and drink the potion soon, saying it's the most help they can give. She asks if that's the time to worry about nonsense and hints that maybe even his ability will work if he drinks it. Confused and surprised, the boy questions what exactly she meant by that. The boy is confused, wonders if the potion could bring his ability back, and remembers having taken a similar one before, with no effect. He concludes that if the power was going to return, it would have happened then. Meanwhile, irritated, he thinks how that girl seems to know too much about his ability, which only makes him more uncomfortable. The warrior gets irritated, says the other makes him shiver, and questions whether he should really follow a plan without knowing anything. He remembers Rick when looking at the golden potion, associating it with something that deeply bothers him, while the other watches and begins to recognize something in that man. He recalls how that man never saw him as equal, always treating him as an experiment. Even with a gentle smile, there was something rotten in his gaze, as if he saw everyone only as materials. That's why he decided to banish him, realizing the interest was only one-sided and empty, destroying the sense of honor he once had alongside him. Alan screams furiously, affirming himself as the hero Alan Cole. He says he reached the top solely with his own strength, without depending on anyone, and threatens to kill everyone who dares disrespect him. Some around just comment that he seems to have completely lost his mind. The girl passes a message from her father saying they have no interest in heroes who would die there. She speaks coldly that if Alan doesn't swallow his pride and accept the potion, he will die without even proving who he really is. Alan, consumed by fury and pride, shouts that he is the strongest hero there is and decides to drink the potion. Meanwhile, the others watch amazed by the courage and power starting to emanate from him. Alan, consumed by the potion's power, becomes surrounded by intense energy. The massacre is about to begin. Alan destroys the magical prison with a single blow, leaving Christopher in shock. He laughs, calling the others weak and crazy, saying there's no use having theory or magic without real strength to back it up. Alan screams madly, saying his desires and thoughts surpassed all their calculations, claiming he is different, strong, and incredible. While laughing insanely, Christopher realizes the effect must have come from the potion he took before the resurrection skill, and coldly asks Alan if he finished watching his life flash before his eyes. Alan stares coldly at his opponent, raises a finger, and says he won't even give him time to scream or say his last words, telling him to try to die without much pain. Soon after, a burst of power arises and he charges fully, leaving the adversary shocked. Tony says he might make a mistake if they blind him like that. Without him, who is the group's ace? Breaking the magical prison was practically a death sentence for the remaining companions. Aaron and Christopher were already moving to the next phase of the plan, and Aaron's last resistance only served to swap one dying person for another. A powerful spirit begins manifesting using Alan's body as a vessel, following the pact they have. The Earth Spirit King emerges, a trump card that Alan reveals with a confident smile, understanding the weight of that summoning. Alan captures Aaron and tortures her, calling her a traitor and demanding explanations before killing her. Aaron suffers, desperate and agonizing, aware she will die right there. Alan continues torturing Aaron, accusing her of selling him out for money and mocking the fact she uses what she earned to build her devices. Aaron responds firmly, saying he underestimates what it means to be an alchemist, explaining that modern alchemy is the result of research accumulated over generations, including her work. Alan, irritated, presses if she still wants to make excuses. Alan shouts that Aaron will die there alone, with no one recognizing her work, and that her research ends at that moment. Aaron, wounded, questions why, and suggests that Alan's own heart rejects what is happening. She says the one who will defeat him will be the alchemist, leaving Alan confused and irritated, not understanding what she means. Alan brutally assaults Aaron, irritated that she continues speaking things he didn't order, calling her useless until the end. Aaron, even fallen and wounded, thinks to herself she was foolish for saying what she did. Before dying, she makes a last silent request for someone to take care of the situation, recognizing it's unfair to leave everything in his hands. The confrontation continues. Alan watches coldly as another figure intervenes, taking Aaron's body and calling Alan a tasteless man. Alan mocks, asking if he's trying to give a moral lesson or show pity. The light-haired boy observes the situation, reflecting if it was really the right thing to do since everything happened exactly as said. With a firm look, he decides to act, but Alan attacks him with a violent blow and accuses him of being just like them, showing a mad smile while attacking. Alan charges full force against the adversary, who dodges at the last moment. The girl watches surprised, realizing Alan is even faster and stronger than before, which puts her on alert for the growing danger. Alan furiously charges the enemy, recalling how he was deceived on the previous floor. With a confident smile, the adversary provokes, asking if he still thinks this is child's play. Alan responds with a crazed look, making clear that the fight is now much more serious. Alan leaps powerfully, trying to land a deadly strike on his opponent, but the other meets him with brutality, smashing him into the ground and creating a huge crater at the impact site. The opponent observes that brute strength isn't everything and decides to change strategy. He releases a dark energy and charges at Alan, who is surprised and prepares to react to the new attack. Even under pressure, Alan continues his advance against the enemy, who uses tricks to try to unbalance him. Irritated, he accuses the opponent of still resorting to cheap tactics, showing he doesn't intend to back down. Alan surprises his opponent with reaction time far superior to other humans she faced. Impressed, she admits he is beyond ordinary. Alan, determined to finish quickly, moves to attack, shouting for her to die. Alan feels he needs to retreat and observe better to find a gap. Meanwhile, the woman reacts surprised by his movement. Suddenly, several monstrous creatures appear, advancing across the battlefield and increasing the tension of the confrontation. Alan grows irritated, noticing the enemy destroying his bats one by one. Meanwhile, the adversary keeps his composure and watches, letting Alan scream in frustration, questioning how many more he must take down before the other finally dies. Cruz starts to feel overwhelmed by the situation, and the group realizes that, despite her effort, the risk is too high. The master orders an immediate retreat, telling everyone to head straight to the hall's exit before something worse happens. The group tries to flee, but the hero, confident and mocking, watches their escape and belittles their effort, calling it a useless game. Suddenly, a mysterious distortion appears on the ground, surprising him and making him fearfully question what it is. The girl is thrown far away with the help of an army of skeletons responding to her command. In mid-air, she thanks them for the help and apologizes with a smile, While the hero watches, surprised by her successful escape, the girl returns to the group, exhausted but safe. The leader praises Cruz for her good work, while she, startled, asks who that guy was, still shocked by the absurd strength he showed. One companion explains that it's Alan's ability, even though he finds it unfair and overpowered. The group discusses why Alan's ability did not activate right after he drank the potion. Some recall that even under Cruz's pressure, he showed no sign of power emerging. Then they mention his ability usually only appears in fights against at least rank S enemies, activating only in critical situations to turn the battle. That's how Alan always guaranteed victory, keeping the pattern of only releasing full strength at the limit. They realized the reason Alan's ability didn't activate was linked to the specific conditions of his power. Analyzing the pattern, they conclude that Alan only managed to use the ability before because the master was present, serving as the necessary trigger. The young man then declares with a confident smile that the master's presence is the decisive factor for activating Alan's strength. They deduce Alan probably took the golden potion created by Doma, the alchemist, even before meeting Cruz. There was no sign he drank another potion after being defeated by Cruz once. So the group concludes breaking the seal was necessary for Alan's powerful ability to activate. However, there remains a concern in the air, indicating another problem behind this. They analyze the situation and realize Alan is destroying the dungeon walls and advancing non-stop, complicating things even more. They think about the accumulated mistakes since Alan and the others entered. First, Doma's automaton breaking through the dungeon, then Tony and the rest betraying each other. Now they try to devise a way to finally take down Alan. They realize the third mistake was underestimating the duration of Alan's ability, which is lasting much longer than expected. Still, the group leader concludes that confirms one of his hypotheses and confidently tells the others they can defeat Alan. The scene shows the group analyzing the situation. The leader concludes that although Alan's ability is a powerful weapon, it can also become his greatest weakness, something Alan hasn't noticed yet. This makes the leader smile confidently, while someone surprised asks what he means. Victor, determined, runs toward the enemy and delivers a powerful punch with all his strength. The impact's intensity echoes across the battlefield, surprising those watching from afar. Victor advances without hesitation and lands a direct kick on the opponent, throwing him hard against the wall and cracking the impact site. The fast, precise charge clearly shows his goal to end the fight as soon as possible. Victor surprises the enemy by moving quickly and landing a sure blow, sending him flying. The adversary tries to understand what happened, confused by the unexpected situation, while watching Victor walk away without clear signs of his next move. The warrior watches in disbelief as his opponent keeps getting up, even after suffering wounds that should be fatal. Determined to finish it, he decides to aim directly at the head, hoping that way he'll finally stop him. Alan suddenly appears, interrupting the other's fight with a provocative smile and asking if he can join the battle. His presence makes everyone tense, immediately recognizing the danger he represents. Alan coldly mocks the opponents, saying Christopher and Aaron are already stains on the dungeon floor for trusting fools. He provokes the group and guarantees he'll soon send them to the same fate, laughing with contempt as he advances to attack. Alan keeps mocking the adversary during the fight, teasing upon noticing he seems irritated, surprised not to see the usual cold expression from the opponent. Alan's opponent gathers all remaining strength and charges a powerful blow with his magic sword, believing that if he lands a single hit, he can take him down. Alan watches confidently the attacks advance, seeming unconcerned by the opponent's desperate charge. Alan easily blocks the blow, enveloping himself in a powerful energy aura that distorts everything around. His opponent watches shocked, seeing that even the magic-loaded attack couldn't break Alan's defense, who remains calm and steady, ready to counterattack. Alan observes the opponent and coldly comments that his skill is a deadly technique with a single strike, but says that in his current state, that wouldn't work on him. Confident, Alan declares he can't even imagine being hit by one of the opponent's attacks while blocking easily and showing total superiority in combat. Alan stares at the opponent with disdain, saying that's what a true hero looks like, someone with such an overwhelming presence it would be impossible for him to reach. While the other is speechless, Alan makes clear that level is too high for someone like him, sarcastically asking if he understands now. The character faces the opponent and accuses him angrily, saying he has no right to call himself a hero. Remembering the companions who chose to fight for his dream, he states he accepted moving forward even over their bodies. To him, a true hero earns allies' trust and becomes a beacon of hope, exactly what he wanted. The character contemptuously rejects the idea that a hero needs to trust companions. He says that as long as someone puts faith in others who are uncertain, he will never be a true hero. For him, what defines a hero is not camaraderie, but an overwhelming force, capable of crushing everything in its path. The warrior arrogantly states he trusts no one, only his own strength, dismissing any idea of heroism based on bonds. The other character is shaken, indignant to see someone so powerful distort what being a hero means. The warrior, driven by determination, decides he must correct the distortion created by the enemy. Convinced, he promises to uproot the evil with his own hands, without hesitation about what he must do. Tony Richards reads news about the hero Derek, who conquered a rank A dungeon, and reflects with disdain. He thinks he won't waste time caring for animals while living in the same era as a hero, showing his pride and ambition. Tony talks with villagers in a tavern, saying he doesn't want to waste the chance to live in such an amazing era, where heroes from legends still fight. Others mock him, saying even heroes from the countryside are rare exceptions, and that his idea of becoming a hero is just a joke. Tony loudly says a hero is someone who faces the unknown without fear. A mysterious old man appears, praises the boy's spirit, and embraces him, saying that's what he likes to see. Tony, surprised, asks who he is, while thinking meeting that man would change his destiny completely. The old traveler explains he's recruiting people of all kinds to be hero candidates. Others are shocked to see he chose Tony, saying he's just a pastor's son with no special talent. The old man, however, says if he had to point out something, it would be Tony's eyes, full of determination. Tony is praised by the old man for always looking beyond the reality around him, with dreams that go far beyond. Without hesitation, he accepts Lord Lasbert's invitation. Soon after, during the journey, the caravan is attacked by bandits, forcing everyone to prepare for battle. Tony travels to the capital and builds bonds with two other candidates: the mage Ashbourne, ambitious and determined to improve his power, and the warrior Eudrin, rude but charismatic and skilled with a sword. Along the way, they train together, exchanging taunts and strengthening camaraderie. Tony impresses his companions with rapid progress, mastering basic spells and showing determination to rise in rank as a swordsman. Eudrin, seeing potential in him, proposes Tony help him create his own faction when they reach the capital, further strengthening their bond. Tony hears Eudrin say many want to join the heroes group, as it means fame and power right away. But Tony, with a serious look, says he doesn't want to depend on the hero's glory. He wants to rise on his own merit, showing his determination to conquer everything by his own strength. Tony and Eudrin part, shaking hands, promising to give their best, and maybe even compete to be the next hero. Later, Tony arrives in the capital, where he is welcomed by a noble recommended by Albest, who asks his name, marking the official start of his journey. Tony is embarrassed to say he doesn't like talking about his past. The hero tells him to rest, as training will start the next day. Meanwhile, a girl mocks him, asking if he's some country bumpkin helped only because of a sad past. But Tony just watches, not too bothered. The girl reveals to Tony that the hero image is a farce created by the rich and powerful, who bought credit for others' feats and built the perfect hero just to control influential adventurers. She explains that even the famous Derek is a legitimate noble's son, using his strength only to protect elite interests. Tony is shocked, questioning why they would go to such lengths for a mere adventurer, but she looks at him coldly, pointing out how naive it is to think otherwise. Tony is silent for a moment, processing the harsh truth. Then he determines it only means he must become a true legend by himself, even if he must crawl through the mud for it. His goal hasn't changed. He will prove his worth with his own hands. The girl watches surprised as he shows firmness in his eyes. Tony shows stubbornness, which draws a smile from the woman watching him. She admits she doesn't hate this side of him. Soon after, Derek appears, gathering his group to announce they will explore a new rank S dungeon, a challenge that will be tough even for them. Tony notices Derek only wants to accumulate more fame, repeating the same old pattern. Urin reunites with Tony and is surprised they're on the same team this time. They exchange a few words, and Urin comments on how Tony remains steadfast, not hesitating even in a rank S mission. Tony answers without much enthusiasm, but Urin praises his courage, saying the heroes group still impresses him. Tony mocks Urin, saying if he relaxes too much, he'll never reach their level, since they've been gaining experience as adventurers ever since. But deep down, Tony trusts him and thinks that if it's Urin, he'll definitely make it. Soon after, inside the rank S Dungeon Master's chamber, the decisive battle begins. Urin, gravely wounded, wonders if it's over and calls for help. Tony runs to him, but Iron already says there's nothing to be done, as although Urin landed the final blow on the monster, it was mutual destruction. They arrived too late to save him. Tony's gaze fills with pain as he realizes his friend's death. A knight watches the battlefield full of bodies and despairs, questioning if that small group is all that remains of the elite team. He complains that if the king learns of such heavy losses, there will be serious consequences, while ordering to leave the dead behind. Tony faces the situation with a tense and indignant look. Tony watches the knight speak with contempt, saying they'll report everything to the king, treating the deaths as mere numbers. Shocked, Tony wonders if that's really the behavior of a hero. While staring at the man, his expression becomes full of indignation. The knight notices his look and, irritated, shouts asking if Tony lost his mind staring at him that way. Tony appears injured and dirty, holding his sword firmly. With a determined look, he declares loudly that he wants to be a true hero. Then he faces someone seated on a throne and answers without hesitation that what he wants is the hero title. Tony stares at the man before him, overwhelmed by an overwhelming force, and wonders if that was the ideal hero the king wanted, a manufactured symbol, sustained by fear and authority. Desperate, he screams in agony, questioning whether a true hero can even exist in this world. Tony freezes upon hearing the enemy's cold words, who raises his weapon saying, "There's nothing emptier than ideals without results." Tony's name echoes, emphasizing the weight of that harsh truth thrown at him.